What is going on, IB? Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Friday, and so you know what that means. It's the Friday free-for-all mailbag. The show's only as good as the questions that we get in the chat. So, no pressure, but
if today's show's not good, basically we're blaming you all. That's basically what Vince is saying.
It's your fault.
So come correct, Notre Dame fans. Come correct.
Right. I'm good at passing the buck, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So before we even start, if it's not good, it's your fault.
if that tells you all at all what kind of mood Vince is in today.
I'm looking forward to it, man. I love Fridays. Friday's my favorite day. This is well documented over the last few years. And look, I've never been disappointed by the questions that the fans come up with. So I'm sure there will be some thought-provoking ones. I'm sure there will be some good ones. There's already a bunch in the queue, ready to go. So, Brian.
Yeah, let's do it.
Without further ado.
And we got some super chats to start off with. And obviously, super chats get pushed to the top of the list once we see them. Right. So let's get rocking and rolling with my guy, Tyler Evans.
Tyler, thanks for the super chat. What do you think makes a great recruiter and position coach now with this crazy football landscape?
I don't think, Vince, I don't know what you think about this, but I don't think that it really changes anything in regard to what makes a great coach. I think the story for what makes a great coach is still the same as what's always made a great coach. You know, are you a good teacher? You know, can you get the most out of your players mentally? Can you get the most out of your players physically? Can you make sure that they're in the right position? They know their system. They know the technical prowess that you as a coach or you as a team have decided is important for that particular position. Can you motivate young men to push past their perceived limitations? Because most young people are better, stronger, or whatever than they think that they are. And they're just not pushed that way. You know, it's one of my issues with dealing with our society today that we allow so much nonsense from young people and act like, well, they're just young. Nonsense. Like, they're capable of so much more. We're the ones lowering the bar for them, not them. Because we were all that way. If we were kind of told, hey, this is all that's expected of you when you were young, like, all right, that's what I'm going to do.
And that's so true. I learned that as my first teaching job. I taught 7th grade, and it was at a higher academic type school. And, you know, these kids were 12 and 13 years old. But I realized really quickly, I taught it like a high school class. And these kids got there. Like, they raised what they were doing and they got there, and it was great. It was an awesome experience. And it's the same thing on the athletic field, right? I mean, kids, number one, they need structure. Number two, they need the bar raised for them to see what they've got, right? And it's at the end of the day, it's all about being a teacher. And I know, look, for all of his faults, one thing Brian Kelly always used to say is he wants teachers as coaches. And he's absolutely 100% correct.
Now, he didn't always hire those people.
He didn't always follow through.
But he at least gave lip service to it, and appropriate lip service to it, correct lip service to it.
Absolutely. And Mike Bray used to say the same thing. He's like, at the end of the day, I'm a teacher, because he started out in high school. I mean, that's
I do believe he thought that and tried to live that out.
Yes.
As far as from a basketball standpoint, maybe not always off
Fair
the field, but at least as a basketball standpoint.
But set the bar high, teach these kids. Absolutely.
And those are still things that matter. And you know, that's something that Nick Saban certainly valued quite a bit as a coach. Recruiting wise, honestly, today, what makes a great recruiter in today's era? You're great at BSing. I mean, honestly, like that, or you're just a dog. You just recruit, you just work hard, and you have a little bit of BSing in you. I mean, it has just become such a used car salesman type of industry. It really makes me sick and makes me sad. And there's always been some of that to it. But again, you go back to the original thing, there was always that level of, hey, we're going to push you, we're going to challenge you, we're going to, and then there was the BS kind of mixed in. But now it's just like, I listen to, you'll have like recruits will like had some video of some kid talking to Kirby Smart. And I'm like, Kirby Smart's talking to this kid like he's 18 years old. And people say, oh, he can relate to players so well. I don't think you should be relating to players that way. You know what I mean? Like, you don't relate to players by acting like you're their age. Right? I mean, dang well Kirby Smart doesn't talk like that or act like that when he's around grown-ups. Right. But it's just kind of, instead of it, and shocker that Kirby Smart has all these discipline issues. He had another player arrested today on some pretty serious charges. Second time this guy's been arrested since he transferred over. He's only been at Georgia 2 years. But that's what's acceptable now. ESPN won't crush him for it. Georgia fans won't crush him for it. As long as he wins, nobody cares. And honestly, that's what it's I'm a little bitter when it comes to that, honestly, Vince. But there's always been this level of recruiting is about BSing. That's always been true to a degree. But it's just got to the point now where it's just, coaches lie. It's just part of the business. Well, why are we accepting that? Why do we accept it? It's okay for coaches to lie. It's okay for politicians to lie. How about, I don't know, we hold them accountable for that. But that's a different story for a different day. I don't really care to get into that. You got to be a pretty good salesman, honestly, and you've got to be pretty good at BSing because that's what recruiting has turned into.
I will take this a different direction as the dad of a recruit and things of that nature, right? So I'm a little closer to it these days than I ever was in the past. And look, my kid's not a 5-star, recruit who's getting offered a ton of money or anything like that. So, when we're talking about Notre Dame recruiting and we're talking about my kids recruiting, it's different. And I totally understand that. But what I will say, because the question just says in this crazy landscape, what makes a good recruiter? At all the stops that we've made, it is still about relationships. And that is incredibly important. And I guess I'm speaking from personal, accounts. And right now, the school's at the top of the list for my kid is the school that he has the best relationship with the coach. And the school is great. Don't get me wrong. It's fine. But it's about relationships at the end of the day. If you are good at having a relationship with a kid, you're going to be a good recruiter. Now, all the stuff Bryan said, that's absolutely part of it.
Yeah, but it's also, you got to think about the fact that what you're talking about is just a different type of recruiting than what
100%. Because we're not talking about 5-star, 4-star type guys where you're selling a bill of goods.
So yeah, relationships matter to a degree. But again, a lot of those relationships are just formed on complete BS. Just like you'll talk to a coach and you'll see how he talks around adults, and then you'll hear him talking to a recruit, and you're like, the dude completely changes how he talks when he talks to recruits. I don't like that. That's just not my thing. So, but there's a bit of just salesmanship. It's salesmanship because you see it all the time, Vince. Coaches get these top players, and it's like they just lied to that kid and told him these things. I mean, some of the stuff I've heard about Urban Meyer and just the lies he would tell recruits, and ask him to do unsavory things. Like he flipped a Notre Dame kid and told them, "Don't tell Notre Dame, that you're doing this until like whatever," because he didn't want. It's just like, and then you wonder why kids would go to Florida or go to Ohio State, get in trouble, and then he'd lose the program after a number of years. There's just something to it because like the relationship thing matters, Vince. I'm not saying it doesn't, but if the relationship is all that there is, I mean, it doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't truly matter. I mean, like at that level, you'll have coaches.
Right,
so I have a great relationship with this guy. I'm going to play over here because they offered me this amount of money, or because they promised me this, or I'd get that. But yeah, I did have a great relationship with that guy. And that happens way more than it used to. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bitter about what's going on in the game right now when it comes to a recruiting standpoint. And there's always been some dirtiness to it. I mean, very dirty business. But at least in the past, it was kind of like you kind of hid that you were dirty. Now it's just flaunted, out there for everybody to see.
John A1 with the super chat. Thank you, John. Really appreciate it. If the USC rivalry is laid to rest post 2024, who are the top contenders for brewing a new annual Notre Dame quality opponent rival?
I mean, look, it won't be post 2024. It would have to be post 2026 because they're under contract for 2 more years. So they're already contracted to play USC in 25 and 26. And I highly doubt Notre Dame's going to let USC get out of that without a substantial financial penalty. But, I mean, I'd say bring back a Michigan State, something like, that's a team that I've always talked about, Vince, that I'd like to see Notre Dame play again is Michigan State. There's not. And then I'd say, well, if you want to get a top opponent, then get a top national opponent. You don't need a top opponent as a rival. I want a rivalry that is a rivalry. I don't care if they're good or not. I care that it's a rivalry. And Michigan State's a rivalry that I would be the first rivalry that I'd like to see get put on my schedule. I will say this, if USC ducks out, that will likely enhance the odds that Notre Dame then will want to stick with Stanford as an annual rivalry, because they're going to want that West Coast opponent still on the schedule. And if USC bails out, then you almost kind of have to then re-up with Stanford. But so you keep Stanford on your list. Do you go out and get a Michigan State? I mean, Miami's one, honestly, that I wouldn't mind seeing kind of on there. Vince, as we talked about this before, I don't know if I'd care about Miami being an every year rivalry like USC was, but I wouldn't mind playing Miami a little bit more. But that's kind of how I would probably go about it, is adding Michigan State. I don't know that I would want because you just can't get a new rivalry,
right?
Like rivalries aren't
happen.
Just formed because remember when Bob Diaco tried to
yes, he even created a trophy.
And it's like, dude, the other school doesn't care. The fans don't care. It just, you can't create a rivalry. There's got to be something about, why would I talk about Miami as a rival? What does Notre Dame and Miami have to do with any, how's there any kind of rivalry there? It's a rivalry because of some of the bad blood that's happened on the football field, right? And just the dichotomy of what those two schools stood for at the time, from an outside looking in, created a rivalry. There's got to be something there that makes it a rivalry, whether it's a healthy rivalry or a contentious rivalry. And what I mean by that is there's some rivalries, so there's a level of mutual respect. I think there has been that between Notre Dame and Navy, for example. I believe there actually is that between Notre Dame and USC. I don't think USC and Notre Dame has even the fan base. There's people that don't like each other, but the Notre Dame and USC fan base don't go at each other like the Ohio State and Michigan fan base. It's not even close. Or North Carolina and Duke during football season, or basketball season, I should say. Or, Alabama and Auburn fans, that kind of thing. There's not that kind of animosity, I don't think. For example, there's not nearly the animosity that I've known or experienced or seen between USC and Notre Dame fans like there is between Notre Dame and Michigan fans, for example. And I know that's the rivalry that most people want back. I told you I'll never change my mind. I don't give a crap about playing Michigan. I don't. I think that's that rivalry does more for Michigan than it does Notre Dame.
Agreed,
in my opinion. So
agreed.
Miami or Michigan State's probably the two that pop in my head, Vince, when I think about a rivalry that I would like to see maybe step in and replace USC if USC cowards out. Yeah, I have an article about this today, Vince.
Yeah, you do.
He's a total coward.
Love it.
This is what he's always done. He did the same exact thing against Oklahoma, and he's full of crap because this whole scheduling for a championship thing, you did that at Oklahoma. And here's a little statistic for you from the article today. I just want to point out that Lincoln Riley doesn't actually believe what he says. He just wants to have a bunch of wins and a bunch of stats because that's ultimately what Lincoln Riley cares about. He doesn't actually care about winning a championship. They played Ohio State in his first year there, right? And they beat Ohio State at Ohio State. That was a game that was scheduled under Bob Stoops because Bob Stoops would schedule well out of conference. Oklahoma used to play people, right? Scheduled Notre Dame multiple times, right? Lincoln Riley took a coward's way out. After that Ohio State game, there's the scheduling that they had the rest of the way was very soft. Here's what, and by the way, that 2017 season when they beat Ohio State, that was the closest Oklahoma came to winning a postseason game. If you remember, they took Georgia to overtime that year in the college football playoff. But in future seasons, let's look at who Oklahoma has played in from 2018 to 2021. Here's their non-conference schedule: 11-2 Army, 5-5 Southwest Missouri State, 5-7 Florida Atlantic, 5-7 South Dakota, 4-7 Western Carolina, 4-8 Houston, 4-8 UCLA, 3-9 UCLA, 3-9 Nebraska, 2-10 Tulane. That's who they played in their non-conference. And then so they, and the Big 12 was down. So they, scheduled for a championship. They won the Big 12 every year. They went to the college football playoff in 2017, the year that they played Ohio State in the non-conference, challenged out of conference. did a pretty darn good job taking Oklahoma or Georgia to the playoff. Next year, weak non-conference, they get to the postseason. Alabama kicks the crap out of them. It's 45. It was 45-34. Wasn't that close. Oklahoma scored late to make it closer. The next year, they went out in 2019 with that soft schedule and got beat 63-28 by LSU. It was 49-14 at halftime. So how did that whole scheduling for a championship work out for them then? Soft non-conference schedule, got to the postseason, got their brains beat in, right? Because that's not exactly how you get to a championship. And he tried using USC as an example, Alabama's an example. Alabama has to play LSU, Texas A&M, Auburn, and Tennessee every season, right? Like back when they would do that. So, and they would still get a good non-conference opponent. They would still get Wisconsin or, USC one year, teams like that. So he's just a coward. He's always been that way. He was that way at Oklahoma. He ran from Oklahoma because they were going to join the SEC. And instead of going to LSU, which wanted him bad, right, which is the place he could have won at if he cared about that, he instead, hightailed it over to USC, where he thought he was going to be playing in a weak Big Ten. Now, just so happens that same offseason, Dan Lanning joined the Pac-12. I said Big Ten, I meant Pac-12. Dan Lanning joined the Pac-12, and Kalen DeBoer joined the Pac-12 that same offseason. And, Lincoln Riley obviously had started off well for him there, Vince. But once the schedule started ramping up, he ended up struggling. And I've got this little statistic for you. Mm-hmm. Lincoln Riley in games against Kyle Whittingham, Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning, Marcus Freeman, and Chip Kelly in his at USC, he's a grand total of 2-6 in those games, by the way. And lost his most recent game to all of them. Because DeBoer beat him this year, Lanning beat him this year, Chip Kelly beat him this year, and Marcus Freeman beat him this year. And of those games, of those 6 losses, 4 of them were by double digits. He wants to play crap schedules where he has the better talent that can put up a lot of points, put up a lot of numbers, win a lot of games with no substance. That's who Lincoln Riley is, and he exposed himself for that at the Big Ten Media Day. And so if they leave, which would be a shame, be sad if that happens, Miami, Michigan State are the 2 teams I'd probably say, Vince. What say? I just had to get that. I don't see any other Lincoln Riley questions on there that I saw and noticed. I had to get that out because it's just been really bothering me. I can't stand cowards. I can't stand coaches who are afraid of competition. I can't stand it. Look who Georgia's playing in the – I got a lot of issues with Kirby Smart. Who's Georgia kicking the season off with this year? Clemson. They've played Clemson a bunch in recent years. The year that the Georgia won their first national title under Kirby, who'd they start the season off with? Clemson, right? So that's what real winners do. They're not afraid to play people. So Kirby Smart's a coward. Or excuse me, Lincoln Riley's a coward. That's basically what it is. I can't stand that guy.
I'll keep this real simple. If Notre Dame and USC are no longer playing each other, you might as well just forget any kind of rivalry game, because if you're going to throw that rivalry away, and I'm not saying Notre Dame's going to do it.
No, you're correct.
But if you're going to throw that rivalry away, then what the heck are we doing? Then there is no more rivalries. I'm sorry. It's heartbreaking that they would even consider, they meaning USC. And I look, I'm not even saying USC is even considering this, because I don't even think that they are. I think this is just a coach just yapping at his mouth.
This is the same team, though, that just abandoned a 100-year relationship with the Pac-12.
Well, that's very true.
The Big Ten. So, do you really think USC
values? But it's money, though.
Yeah.
And the Notre Dame game brings in money. If USC ever sells out a game, it's because Notre Dame's there.
They're now partnered with the same network that already hosts Notre Dame anyway. You know what I mean? So, I get
it, but they're going to make more money.
Yeah.
More money having Notre Dame on the schedule than not having Notre Dame.
I would think so, but yeah.
So if it's about money, that's an empty argument to me. If this rivalry gets canceled, forget about rivalries in college football. That's where I'm at. I'm very bitter about the whole situation. And again, I don't think USC does it. I think this is a coach spouting his mouth off, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, he's definitely spouting his mouth off. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that view it that same way, sadly. That's the thing that frustrates me so much, Vince, is because there are a lot of people. There's a lot of people in our country right now and in sports in a lot of ways that are just trying to figure out easy ways to win.
ridiculous.
Let me go join some super team. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
I can't build up my own team the right way. So let me go join some super team. Call me crazy, but all my heroes as a child won championships with the teams that they were drafted by and battled through and had tough. You know what I mean? Like
Shocker.
But it's different for like a Peyton Manning who got cut. Right, the Colts didn't want him anymore, so he goes to the Broncos
they let
and
him
wins a
go.
championship. Right, that's a different kind of story. But there's just too many people looking for the easy path, and Lincoln Riley is the epitome of like that soft-minded modern coach, which is why I don't see him ever winning. I mean, I could end up eating my words someday, but I don't see him ever winning.
Not anytime soon.
Winning. I just don't think he's got the mental toughness, and a team isn't going to be mentally tough if the head coach isn't. Like DeAnton Lynn is the D coordinator, can only do so much. Right? I mean, he's not the head coach. He can only do so much. Lincoln Riley's always going to be the stumbling block for that team. Yep. Always going to be that. And as I've said before, the further away they've gotten from Bob Stoops, the softer his teams have gotten. Physically softer the teams have gotten. I use a similar thing about Ryan Day. Right? I mean, it's like the further away they get from Urban Meyer's tenure, the softer that team gets. Now we'll see if Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles together as coordinators can kind of fix that. We'll find out, but that's those two guys to me are the epitome of just that soft-minded modern, genius football coach, right? So, yeah. Thank you for letting me get that rant out. I needed that today.
I think that's 2. I think I should be keeping track.
That's 2.
You had one earlier.
What was the first one?
I don't even remember.
Oh, about recruiting? I don't think that's a rant. That's just stating the obvious. Yeah.
All right, we got another
facts, brother.
We got another super chat here from ICURN with Irish Luck. Thank you so much for the super chat. Do you think that Greathouse could be the same kind of place?
Player.
Okay, thank you. The same kind of player that Puka Nacua for the Rams. Not super fast, but good route runner who just gets open.
Yeah, I mean, I see the similarities. I mean, somebody in the chat's upset about us using Puka Nacua as an example, or somebody using Puka Nacua as an example because he's only had one good season. But I mean, that one good season, he had over 100 catches.
I was going to say it was a really good season.
Yeah, but also Puka was a really good player in college as well. I mean, so I think there's some, he couldn't stay healthy, but when he's healthy, he's a pretty good player. I think Puka and Jaden are a little bit different. I think they're similar in some ways. Neither of them are burners. At least Puka had pretty good, if I remember correctly, had a pretty good pro day number, if I remember correctly. But I'm actually going to look that up. But he's not like he's not Chris Mitchell or Jaden Harrison or Chris Tyree, right? But he runs well. He's a good athlete. There's some similarity, Vince, but I don't see. He ran a 4.55 actually, just similar to what Jaden Greathouse will be. Knows how to get open. Though broadly, I would say yes. Broadly,
sure.
Specifically, I just think there's some differences in them as players that I'd say, okay, well, I wouldn't comp Puka Nacua. Jaden Greathouse and Puka Nacua wouldn't be comps for me as far as like really diving in. But as far as just the overall bigger picture standpoint, similar impact, sure. I think Jaden Greathouse can be more of a volume player in college than Puka was. Puka was not a big time volume guy in college. He was actually more of a kind of a big play guy, to be honest with you. I mean, his junior year was his one healthy year, and he averaged 18.7 yards per catch at BYU. So, there's some similarities there. Yeah, knows how to run routes, just gets open. Sure. There's some similarities there.
Okay.
Again, I didn't watch Puka a ton last year. I don't watch a lot of NFL. I'm going off of what I saw him in college. Maybe if I watched more of the Rams, I would say, oh, man, that version of Puka is a lot like what Jaden Greathouse is. Maybe I might say that, Vince, but I can only go off of what he was at BYU.
Yeah, that's fair.
And at BYU, I don't know that I would say necessarily that type of player. They're a little bit different. I'll let you take this one, Vince, because I got nothing on this one.
Okay. Irish Gordian Knot, are there any traditions from other schools that would fit right into Notre Dame? Maybe instead of a giant silly drum, Notre Dame would have a giant bagpipe, or instead of Bevo, They bring back Clashmore Mike. I think stealing other traditions are dumb. No offense to. I'm not saying.
I think he's saying more of like looking at what other teams do and saying how can Notre Dame tailor what they do to that. And like his two examples, I would say Notre Dame already kind of does that. I mean, like in certain ways. I mean, they've got the leprechaun, and Texas has Bevo, Notre Dame has the leprechaun.
I mean, everybody has a mascot though. Sure. So I mean, I don't know how.
Sure.
I don't know.
I don't know that stuff matters, Vince. Do you? I mean,
first of all, you can't manufacture traditions, in my opinion. So, like, if you don't have it already, don't try to create it because it's just going to look manufactured. I'll say that. I can't think of anything specifically. Like, a lot of schools have a player walk of some sort. Obviously, Notre Dame already does that. As far as like a big drum or, stuff of that nature, like I don't want Notre Dame to change their mascot or do anything like that. Look, their mascot's a person. So changing it to an animal is not really going to work. Yes, they had Clashmore Mike, but it was like a border collie or something like this. So it's like a little itty bitty dog. Like what is be nipping at your ankles? You know what I mean?
I thought it was a bigger dog than that.
I thought it was a little dog.
No, I mean, I've seen some pictures of one of, I mean, again, whenever you have like a mascot dog, there's going to be different ones of it. But like the one Newt Rockney had was smaller, but then like later it was different breeds of dogs. They had a bigger dog.
So Irish Terrier. That's what it was.
Yeah. So,
Irish Terriers are not big.
Yeah. But again, I've seen pictures of the mascot dog, and some of them were bigger dogs. So they weren't all small dogs, but that's the other thing too, is like, it's different dogs from what I've seen, at least, whereas like Georgia's like, it's Uga 1, Uga 2, Uga 97. It's a bulldog.
Right.
It's an English bulldog. Right.
But that's your mascot too. Yeah. So I mean, I look, I love where your head's at, IGK, but I am a big fan of not manufacturing traditions.
Yeah. Now what I don't mind is like, okay, now they do smoke coming out. That's fine. That's not tradition. That's just a cool aesthetic, or fireworks before night games.
Right.
That stuff's cool. Like doing things that enhance the experience is cool.
The light show.
And then maybe some of those things catch on. Like tradition needs to be natural. Like you do something and it just over time it takes on that and becomes a tradition. Right. There's some traditions Notre Dame does that I'd actually like to see them get rid of. I'd like to see them get rid of the lines in the end zone. And I'd like to go to a colored end zone with Notre Dame and Notre Dame on one side and the Irish on the other, something like that.
Yeah.
But hey, it is what it is. But I don't know that I care. I might be the reason I said, Vince, maybe I might not be the best person for this, because I just don't care about that kind of stuff. Like, I don't care about cheerleaders. I don't care about, like the Buffalo dude running out. But the only one that I've ever seen that was pretty cool that I actually paid attention to was at Florida State. The first time I went down there, and when the horse comes out, Chief Osceola comes out, and he's got that flaming spear, and I'm like, okay, that was pretty cool. Like, all right, man. Like the little Trojan dude, what's his name? The Traveler. That's lame. It's like, whatever, dude. It's like you got a little fake sword. They're not letting you in there with a real sword. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, but my man, Chief Osceola, comes, I think that's his name, right? He comes out with like a legitimate spear on fire and throws it into the ground, and the crowd goes crazy. I'm like, all right, that's pretty cool. Like, Enter the Sandman is way cooler on TV than it is there. Because there it would be the other way. Forever. Because like they go through this like long walk. It's like, okay, guys, it's been 5 minutes. Can you guys come out of the tunnel now? Like, please.
Right.
Like, but on TV, you just see it like at the very end when they're about to come out, and you're like, okay, this is freaking awesome. But it's like the buildup takes so long, you're just like kind of over it by the time they get there. You know what I mean? But I've seen that now twice, and it was, all right, whatever, But Norman, the dude's coming out, that's only fun to watch when it crashes. Sadly, I'm sorry to say, I got a little. You ever seen that thing tip over? Vince?
The Oklahoma, the Sooner,
yes.
The Sooner Scooter or whatever it is.
When that thing
it's hilarious
because they turn too quick.
And they always have some broad up front, and she just goes flying. Like, oh, it's hilarious.
Some broad up front. Okay, Vince.
Yeah, I went there
to get me in trouble today. Yeah, like the dudes in Colorado running out the Buffalo. That doesn't do anything for me. My only thought is I hope it doesn't go to the bathroom on the field. That's like the only thing I care about. Like I don't get into that kind of stuff. Now, would it be cool to have somebody coming out with bagpipe? I don't know that you could really hear that in an 80,000 seat stadium.
Well, unless you mic'd it up, which
right, but like the lacrosse team does
contrived.
that. That's pretty cool. And I kind of feel like if Notre Dame football team started doing that, then maybe they'd be stealing a little bit of the thunder from what the lacrosse team does.
100%.
So I think there's plenty of traditions at Notre Dame, in my opinion, Vince. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
There's you know a tradition I would love to see come back for Notre Dame that I'd like to see them steal from like Georgia and Bama and teams like that.
The national championships.
Winning championships.
There you go. I knew that.
I would love to see come back to Notre Dame.
I knew that was coming.
Yes. Well, and now here's my question for your IGK. Like, so I obviously don't care a lot about this, and I don't think Vince does either. But I mean, your question came from somewhere. I'd be happy to hear some things that you guys would like to see, because like this is just our opinion. It doesn't mean we're right or wrong. It's just our opinions on this. Other people love that there's cheerleaders at games, right? Like I know some dads that have daughters, and like when they're at a football game, like that's something that they can kind of aspire to be a part of. Like,
sure.
Just like, you're a band person. Like, man, I would love to grow up and be part of the Notre Dame band. That's
That's
cool
real.
deal. You're not an athlete.
That's real.
Like you're good at this, and you're part of the environment. You're not necessarily part of like what's happening on the field, but you're a part of the experience of being Notre Dame. Right. That's pretty cool. And respect to those people. It's just not something I care about. Like, I'm not like, get rid of cheerleaders. I don't know. That's fine. Like they can do. I just don't have to care about it. You know what I mean? So, but because it just doesn't add anything to what I view and what I care about being in a football game. But I've never been to a whole lot of football games, Vince, just as a fan. I mean, I've very, very few. A couple Notre Dame games, an Ohio State game when I was in the 5th grade, a couple NFL games. But like for the most part, every time I've ever been to a college football game, it's either been as a player, as a coach, or working. And so I kind of understand the need to have somebody to kind of keep the crowd engaged. And
sure.
I get all that, right? It's just for me, I don't care. So I'd be curious what you guys think about that. Like, what are some traditions you guys would like to see maybe Notre Dame have, or either ones that they have or ones that you'd like to see them do? That would be a more of an interesting discussion. So very curious to hear what you guys think about that. So let me know in the chat what you guys think. So as long as your suggestion isn't that crazy thing that the Texas A&M weirdos do the night before a game or whatever. As long as it's not that.
During the game, it's pretty weird too. But that's different.
Do they do it during the game?
Well, like the or whatever they do, that's during the game, man. Yeah. Like it's weird.
Yeah. So somebody said, Coach, you played college football. Of course you cared about the hot cheerleaders. I just not at football. Not at football. I might have cared about them after the game,
after the
party or something like that.
Right.
I mean, it's not like I looked over like, hey, check out the cheerleader. Like, first of all, I'm like, they're kind of doing their game day thing. They're you respect what they're trying to accomplish.
Right.
But I was usually too busy focused on, I don't know, trying to win, or in the case at Salisbury, trying not to get killed, because my offensive line was so bad. But no, I didn't care about that stuff. Again, I don't say that disrespectfully, Vince. I have no disrespect towards cheerleaders.
Right. It's all part of it.
It just isn't something that I care about at a football game. So I'd be curious to hear some of the people. Some people say like drum lines. Does Notre Dame has that though, right? Don't they have?
They have a drum line, and they do the drum line thing at midnight before games. It's a drum circle is what they call it, and it's at midnight on Friday nights or Saturday morning, depending on how you look at it. Every home game they have the drum circle, so that actually happens already. Just maybe some of people are in bed.
Well, and then like there's other things that Notre Dame does that a lot of people don't experience because they're either get there before the game or they're over in the parking lot or there's
like the trumpets in the dome are really cool. And like
that's awesome.
It's
I don't know awesome. I don't think they do that inside anymore. I don't believe.
I think they do.
I was told they haven't done it since COVID.
Really?
Yeah, they do it outside now.
That's stupid. The whole point of it is to be
inside. It's a fire hazard because there's too many people. It's above the fire. It's just stupid. Yeah. So.
Don't get me started on that stuff. All right. Next question. Kish squared.
I could maybe be on the verge of getting a rant out of Vince today. Let me see which buttons I can push here moving forward.
How would you compare the feeling of entering into Freeman's third year to the feeling of entering into Weiss's third year, which also had everyone optimistic?
I wasn't super optimistic going into year 3. I mean, I thought they'd be a lot better than they were, but there was a lot of uncertainty because it was just a brand new overhauled roster.
Over 07 was
I
his
mean,
third year,
just
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
they were completely overhauling the roster.
Yeah, and the other part of it is people on the inside, people who covered the team also knew how they practiced and were very wary of the product that was going to be put on the field because most of the guys that were going to play had never seen the light of day at practice. Man, that's just the reality of it. And for better or worse, and in 07 it was for worse, in 05 and 06 it was for better, he inherited a team that had some experience, and those guys, especially offensively, specifically, those guys were going to be around for a while or a couple of years. And so he just focused on the starters on offense, made them really good. Look, that Quinn and company, they were really good, and it was fun to watch. No doubt about it, right? But as soon as they left, all those guys that didn't get any reps at practice now had to be the starters, and they just didn't have the foundation. They just didn't have it. And that was the problem with Weiss and company, was that they didn't teach the fundamentals. It was they treated it more like the NFL. And in the NFL, guys come to you with fundamentals. You don't have to worry about that. It's more about the X's and the O's and game planning and the decided schematic advantage and all of those things. College is still, you got to worry about fundamentals, man. You still got to teach these kids. And all those kids that were standing on the sidelines at practice were now going to be your starters, and they had no foundation whatsoever. And it showed in 07, and it showed moving forward, even under Willingham. And so,
well, can I ask you a question, Vince? This is a genuine question.
Yeah.
Everything you're laying out now is spot on as far as retroactively looking back to how bad 07 was. What was your feeling? Do you remember? I mean, first of all, it was 17 years ago, so I barely remember what I did 17 days ago, much less 17 years ago.
You're not wrong.
But do you remember did you feel that way going into that season? Because a lot of this is like a realizations afterwards. Because I didn't cover the team, so I wasn't at practice. I didn't know how bad it was fundamentally. I can only go by what I saw on TV.
Sure.
Did you feel that way going? Like, did you see a really rough season coming, or did you think they'd be better than what they were?
Look, I am not going to be the guy that was like, I saw this whole thing coming. No, I did not see what happened in 07 as an entirety coming. I remember talking to people, though, saying, man, I'm kind of excited to see what practice looks like because we've never seen these guys take snaps before. You know what I mean? And we all thought that there was talent on the roster, which there was. I mean, there was talent on the roster. And so I think
it was just young.
It was just really young. Exactly.
Jimmy was a freshman.
Yes.
Golden was a freshman.
And I just think that a lot of
Duvall was a freshman.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just think a lot of people figured that the talent would take over and win some of the games that they lost. Right. I didn't think that they were going to be able to repeat what they did in 05 and 06, but I didn't see 07 coming. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a happy medium in there somewhere where it all makes sense now that you look back on it. But I was expecting them to take a step back, just not as big of a step.
Yeah, that team was that was a very young team. Well,
right.
I'll just say this. There was a lot more what ifs. Like I was actually probably, because again, I looked at it more as a fan.
Yeah.
That season, but I there was a lot of ifs going into that season that were far more extreme than this year. Because then it was like, man, if Armando's back to being healthy before the leg injury, if Jimmy's is this, and if this guy's that, and if guy's that, if this guy does this,
sure.
But and the other thing too is that one big difference. One thing that I was concerned about is when I read that they were tinkering with the offense to possibly fit Demetrius Jones, I was like, yeah, that's a mistake. Right? Like, because like Demetrius was, a quarterback I liked coming out of high school. I didn't love him, but I liked him.
Sure.
But it's kind of like he was never going to hold off Jimmy Clausen for 3 years. I mean, it was always going to be eventually Jimmy. And because Jimmy was way better than him, and he was way better than Demetrius Jones, way better than Zach Frazier, way, 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 way better than Evan Sharpley. and he was going to be the guy at some point in time. Why are you tinkering with your offense to add some stuff for Demetrius Jones? And they did it all off season, and it lasted a half. And it's just like you wasted all that practice time for nothing. So I think that was the only thing that I looked at and didn't understand, but I didn't think it was going to result in like a 3-9 season. I'm not going to, like you, Vince, I'm not going to pretend like, oh yeah, I saw a bad season coming.
Because there are people that say that kind of stuff.
I'll say that about 2016 because I literally am on record.
You told me about it,
right?
You're like, dude, there are some issues in the locker room.
And I said on the national radio show, this team's either going to end up being really good or they're going to implode, and they imploded.
Right.
I did not have that same feeling in 07. So I just, I think that that's something that is very different about this team. This is a far more experienced football team. I mean, the question marks that we have on this team are some sophomores, Jaden Greathouse and Jeremiah Love and Christian Grace. But it's for the most part, it's like, okay, how good is senior Riley Leonard going to be? How is 6-year senior Jack Kaiser going to transition to playing Will? How good is 6-year senior RJ Oben going to be after transferring over from Duke? How good is 5th-year senior Rod Hurd going to be after transferring over from Northwestern, right? Can Xavier Watts repeat his unanimous All-American caliber season, right? It's how good is sophomore Charles Jagasaw going to be? How good is redshirt sophomore Billy Schrouth and those guys? I mean, and with that O-line that year, you were hoping that certain guys were better than that. That was the other concern I had. I will say this. I wasn't sure how good the O-line was going to be because there were guys starting on the O-line that I just didn't love coming out of high school. The late Paul Duncan, Michael Turkovich, some of those guys. And you had Sam Young, but outside of that, there were some question marks there. But I just thought, they'll be fine. They'll figure it out, and they definitely did not figure it out. That's for sure. I just think there's far more knowns. And here's the other biggest thing. That team, if the offense wasn't great, that team was going to struggle because they just weren't going to be great on defense. I mean, they weren't as bad as like the Brian Van Gorder era, but Charlie didn't quite understand how to build a great defense either. And I did have some concerns about that. I did.
We got another super chat from Ryan Elliott. Thank you very much, Ryan. Really appreciate you. It says, good show, boys. Man, I'm ready for football. Can't argue with you there, man. I am chomping at the bit. Like I have seriously considered like just going and watching the high school team practice. You know what I mean? I watch the huddle every night, like of their practices and everything, just to get my fix. And luckily on Wednesday, we finally get a chance to see Notre Dame practice and, at least run around with helmets on. But Ryan.
Are you going to be there? Are you going to come back in town for that?
TBA.
Okay.
TBD.
Because you said we. I'm like, okay.
We at Irish Breakdown.
Okay, gotcha.
We'll see.
I gotcha.
Irish Gordian Knot, will a national championship propel Marcus Freeman to stick around and pursue Notre Dame legendary status? Or will the NFL, Ohio State's siren song prove too enticing? Can I just say, can we relax on the Ohio State thing with Marcus Freeman, please?
It's
not a thing.
I don't get this. I mean, look, I understand where people would ask the question, right? I mean, look, the guy played at Ohio State. I understand all that.
Get it.
But at the same time, it's kind of like, what evidence do we have that he has a desire to go back to Ohio State? Right? Like, why are we worried about something that we have 15 ifs have to happen before this is even a conversation, right? Like,
job's not open, by the way.
I just and what would make you think that Ohio State would want Marcus Freeman right now? Like,
fair.
So let's think about this logic, because I actually know some Ohio State fans are like, I'd like to have Marcus Freeman as my head coach. So you want to fire the guy that has twice beat Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame and hire Marcus Freeman. Now, I would much rather have Marcus Freeman over Ryan Day, but that's for different reasons, right? But like, you don't fire a guy that's done what Ryan Day has done and replace him with somebody who he's beaten. That's like Michigan firing Jim Harbaugh and hiring Ryan Day. Like, think about that. Like, that just makes no sense to me. But look, there's enough to worry about for Notre Dame. We don't need to invent things to be worried about. And I just feel like this whole Ohio State thing is just, I mean, it is not often that guys go back to their alma maters and coach. I mean, Dabo could have gone back to Alabama if he wanted, you know what I mean? Like, but he didn't want it. He wanted to stay at Clemson. You know, and you don't see a whole lot of times where coaches end up doing those type of things. And so, yeah. All right, Coach Bent 574 with a question: are there any past concepts and family of run plays that Denbrock's used in the past that you were hoping that he incorporates this year? Are there any that you absolutely don't want to see, and why not? Well, I don't know that there's any that I don't want to see. I mean, if you believe in something and you're good at implementing it and good at getting success with it, I don't care if it's something I like or not. Things he's run in the past. I mean, Coach, I think you're a board member, so check out the film breakdown at the top, the film room at the top of the board that has the list of some breakdowns I've done. You know, slot fade that we'll see. You know, I'm gonna hopefully have a 4 verts breakdown soon. It's a lot I wanted to get done this summer. I haven't had a chance to get to yet, but you know, there's going to be those type of things. But the run game, he's an inside outside zone guy. He'll run some counter, he'll run some pin and pull a little bit as a wrinkle, but he's been an inside outside zone guy. They did run a little bit of duo last year, and it wouldn't shock me if we see more of that at Notre Dame. But he's an inside zone, outside zone guy. He has been so far. So, and I'm fine with that. The only thing that I haven't seen a ton of from Mike Denbrock in the past is a really good running back and receiver screen game. That's something I'd like to see a little bit more from this offense. You know, even this year because of the unique weapons that they have. But they definitely do a lot of tight end screen stuff.
Yeah, the concept I'm looking forward to is the one you described the other day in the show, you know, where basically to roll out, you got to run pass option for the quarterback. I mean, come on. It's going to be borderline deadly. So that's what I want to see. And all the ideations and variations that you can run it out of, obviously, but that's a dangerous, dangerous play for Notre Dame.
Yeah. Somebody asked, what has Ryan Day done? He is a Big Ten version of the USC coach. I mean, I said it earlier that I think him and Lincoln Riley are somewhat similar, but
you did.
I mean, here's one difference between Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day. Ryan Day's won a playoff game.
True.
I mean, that's kind of a thing. He doesn't get his brains beat in every time he plays a playoff game, right? I mean, in 2019, Ryan Day's first year, they were a fourth quarter Trevor Lawrence being Superman comeback away from beating Clemson. In 2020, they beat Clemson and lost to Bama. And in 2022, they almost beat Georgia. I mean, they took Georgia down. I mean, they were a missed field goal away from beating Georgia. So let's be honest. I dislike Ryan Day, but his teams have been far more competitive in the postseason than Lincoln Riley's have been at Oklahoma and at USC. So that's one pretty big difference between the two. So again, and I do think there's some similarities, but let's not act like Ryan Day hasn't done anything in his career. But let's also not act like Ryan Day's a world beater either. It's just the thing is you just don't fire a coach that has had his level of success just because he's not having enough success. I've said this before. John Cooper did not get fired just because he couldn't beat Michigan. He got fired because he couldn't beat Michigan, and his teams were fading in his last couple of years. I think they went 8-4 his last year as a coach, and actually his last 2 years they were not very good. And I'll just pull up his record here real quick, Vince. Last 2 years at Ohio State, they went 6-6 and 8-4. That's why he got fired. Now, were they maybe looking for a reason to fire him? Sure. But the reason that they were able to is because he went 14-10 in his last 2 years. If he was still going 11-1 and 10-2 every year, Vince, they probably don't fire him. Let's be honest about that. They fired him because he stopped winning. And that's the reality of, you know, if Ryan Day goes out and goes 8-4 this year, then he may get fired. And honestly, with the team he has, you probably should consider it because he clearly doesn't know how to run the program anymore. But you're not going to fire Ryan Day just because, like, so if he loses to Michigan, they might. So if he goes 11-1 and they lose to Michigan, you're going to fire him. And you think you think Marcus Freeman's going to look at that job and say, yeah, that seems like a reasonable expectation of a job over there. Let me take that job. No, sir. And I would be willing to bet you that Marcus Freeman still has in the back of his mind some of the things that were said about him by Ohio State fans when he took the Notre Dame job. I'm pretty sure that he'll remember some of that. as well. So I just, yeah. Oops, here we go. It's this one.
Muhammad Abdi, Bryan, if you were a head coach today, how will you rank the level of importance recruiting, NIL, transfer portal, coaching staff, facilities, scheduling?
I mean, all that's important. I mean,
Right.
look, there's not one that's more important than the other. And people say, well, recruiting's the most important. Is it really? If you're recruiting very well, but you have a bad coaching staff and you schedule either hard or too soft or whatever, look, there's teams, guys, that finish high in rankings and recruiting every year and don't win football games. All right. You need all of it. All of it's what matters. Nick Saban didn't win because he was a great recruiter. He won because he was a great recruiter and a great developer and a great coach, and they scheduled smart, and he hired good coaches for the most part, and they had great facilities. All of it ties in together, Vince. And so you need to be good at all of it. If you're going to win a championship, you need to be good at all of it. And some of those things tie together. I mean, recruiting, the portal, and NIL all go together. It's all part of talent acquisition. And nowadays in talent acquisition, transfer portal is recruiting because, and here's why I say that, and not just because the act of trying to convince someone to come play for you, but it's more of a, here's who our team is coming back. Here's what we need to go do from an acquisition standpoint to make our team better. Before it was just high school and some transfers that would sit out or whatever. Usually they pursued you. Now it's like, okay, we need to rebuild our offensive line. How are we going to do that? All talent out there, some freshmen, some transfers. We're going to have to rebuild that way. It's all part of recruiting, and a big way to recruit to a championship level is you've got to be competitive in the NIL universe. That's just part of recruiting. So those things all go together. You also need a great coaching staff. I think that's even more important now in this era of players making a lot of money, and the egos and the attitudes. Even more important that you've got coaches that can kind of bring all that together. And that's something that Mike Norvell's done a great job so far. And then scheduling smart. Now, some people view scheduling smart like Lincoln Riley.
Scheduling
let's
easy.
Be cowards and schedule easy. I think scheduling smart has more to do with not who you play, but when you play them. Right? So, you don't play Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, and USC back to back to back to back. There's nothing wrong with playing those teams, but you just maybe mix it up a little bit. Make sure you schedule your bye week, properly. Make sure you don't have too many road games in a row, or, trips, back to, if you're Notre Dame, you don't go to Boston one week and then, LA the next, or Stanford the next, like they did in 2015, right? I mean, you've got to be smart about some of those type of things, Vince, but that's not about make a softer schedule. That's about scheduling smarter.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, where I come down on. They're all, I mean, I'm not trying to duck your question, Muhammad. I just really believe, good coaches don't put more of a priority on other things holistically. During certain parts of the year, certain parts are more important than the others. But when you look at a big picture, they all have equal value, because each one of the things that you talk about, with the exception of facilities, can completely undermine the other.
Sure.
So if you're great at recruiting, but you're not good with the coaching staff and you don't schedule smartly, it'll undermine how good you are recruiting. If you got a great coaching staff and you schedule smart, but you're not very good at talent acquisition, it'll undermine how good you are from a coaching staff and scheduling standpoint. Right? Like, I think Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy are phenomenal football coaches. They have zero chance to win national championships. Why? Because they're never going to be able to acquire talent to the level you need to compete for a championship. Right? And we've seen other coaches that recruit extremely well. Jimbo Fisher recruited extremely well at Texas A&M from a recruiting ranking standpoint.
This is true.
How well did that result in winning?
Which we all could have told you.
So that those are things that kind of factor into. You've got to be good at all of it to really be a championship football team.
Wyatt Kerwin, defensive touchdowns are game-changing, but the offense can limit damage, save games by making a tackle after a turnover. Do teams have drills where the offense practices tackling after turnovers?
Yeah.
Sure.
I can't say that I know that Notre Dame does that.
Right, because we're not there.
I haven't seen it, but I'd be shocked if they don't. Because you'll have tackling circuits, and some of it's for special teams, and you'll always see running backs and receivers doing that.
That's where a lot of times you get a lot of that tackling practice is going to be during special teams.
Right.
Do you really need your offensive linemen going through tackling circuits? Maybe
Some of them,
once
the
in a
ones
while.
that are, like
Yeah.
you're if you have one that's long snapping, he
Sure.
definitely will.
Oh, that's different.
Yeah.
Yes, that completely. Look, we went to a kicking camp this year where they made the kickers go through tackling drills. I'm not lying. I was shocked. It's the one and only time it
I have
happened.
never seen that at Notre Dame or anywhere else. We never did that, but
No, I was like, oh, okay.
it's not a
Interesting.
stupid idea,
Yeah.
honestly, because
So,
you may have to tackle someday.
yeah.
I've seen punters do that. I've never seen a kicker do that.
Right. Well, and it was kickers and it was a
Yeah.
specialist camp, so they just like,
Yeah.
hey,
But to answer your question, yeah, you'll do some stuff
sure,
like that. Yes.
not every
And
day.
then you hope
but yeah,
it's one of those things you prepare. You hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Right. Same thing's true in
Absolutely.
football. You don't ever
Absolutely.
want to have to be in a situation where, like scramble drills. I don't ever want to have to be in a situation where my quarterback has to scramble. But when he does, we need to make sure we're prepared on how to handle it. So there's all types of those situations. Now, it's not also not something you do every day either. It's not quite
Right.
like that. So,
but good question.
very
like
good
it.
question. Yeah.
Muhammad Abdi, Bryan, what statistical categories do you value the most when evaluating how good an offense and defense is?
Well, that's a good question. That's gonna depend on the system. Part of that is caveats because like Georgia's never been a great tackle for loss sack team because their defense is just geared towards that. Their defense is geared towards completely shutting down the run game and then being disruptive in the pass game. They're not a team that's racks up a lot of negatives. They rack up a lot of stuffs. But generally speaking, what I tend to look at yards per play, yards per attempt, yards per play overall as a team, yards per attempt, run game, yards per attempt, pass game. That you always want to be high. Like if you're 14 yards per catch and 8 yards per attempt, I don't care as much about that as if you're 14 yards per completion and 10 yards per attempt. Any kind of efficiency number is something I'm going to have. I'm going to take value in, Vince. Like you could say, hey, we didn't do a great job. We only averaged 4.9 yards per attempt, but then. But who are you playing? Were you playing a top 5 run defense? Was your efficiency numbers way up? Or you could also say, hey, we averaged 5.8 yards per attempt. We did pretty good. Well, you had an 80-yard run at the end of the game against their backups, right? I mean, you didn't actually run the ball that well. You had a couple big runs, but overall, the lack of efficiency was there. So there's all types of different things. So I'll tell you what I'll be looking at this year for Notre Dame, the numbers I'll be looking at to measure success, big picture-wise, yards per attempt, yards per play, yards per pass attempt, yards per rush attempt, yards per play total. Those are the 3 that go into that. I'll be looking at because again, I care more about yards per attempt than I do completion percentage as well, Vince. Because if you're 78% completion rate, but you're only averaging 7.3 yards per pass attempt, you're completing a lot of balls behind the line of scrimmage, not getting any yards. So that's why I care about yards per attempt. I care about red zone touchdown percentage. That's a big one for me. I want that to be. If you rank 15th in red zone offense and you're 5th in red zone touchdown rate, okay, that works for me. There's going to be things that are hard to measure statistically that are important to me. So like I don't count like hey, what's your because it's not a kept stat, but what's your as a coach, what I would measure is what's your success rate in turning opposition mistakes into touchdowns. So like if the other team turns the ball over, gives up a long return to your offense or to your special teams, what is your success rate in converting those into touchdowns? That's a big thing for me as far as how good an offense is. And then on the flip side for a defense is how good at you are limiting touchdowns when your own offense or special teams makes a mistake. That's a sign of how good you are on offense and defense. And so, we talked about this in 2022, Vince, where the Notre Dame defense wasn't great in 2022, but we argued it during the offseason that, look, it was better than what it showed statistically from a point standpoint because of how many touchdowns the offense and special teams not special teams as much, but, the offense allowed by, pick sixes or turnovers deep in territory, things like that. So, those things that factor into it as well. So, your efficiency numbers, yards per play, I don't care as much about yards per game because that can be a skewed stat in a lot of different ways. I care about big play numbers. I'm going to do a more measuring this year and paying attention to like Notre Dame's plays of 20 or more yards. I think that is a statistic I've come to appreciate a lot more, Vince. and I've always felt that you needed to be explosive and efficient, but actually measuring it is what I'm referring to. Like how long have you known me, Vince? Long time, right? How long have you? That's how long you've heard me say how important it is to be explosive and efficient on offense, right? So numbers that are measuring that offensively and numbers that limit that defensively. I am someone who still values being really good run defense because it's something that factors into I mean, we did that breakdown recently, right? Where we showed these are the numbers of teams that have won championships in the rush defense. You can say stopping the run doesn't matter as much as it used to, but I'm just pointing out that all the champions that we look at now are teams that have won that are pretty good against the run, unless they were the exceptional scoring almost 50 point per game teams. Those things all factor in. So, I don't know if that helps or not, but those are things that I kind of look at when I'm evaluating if a team is good on offense or defense.
Coach Bent 574, only amongst the returning position coaches, which are you most excited to see what they do with their group this year? Oh, there's one major one, right?
Go.
It's Joe Rudolph. I mean, it's going to be, look, if you want to go back and listen to our podcast the other day when we talked about offensive linemen, this is a make or break year. I mean, this is a huge year for Joe Rudolph in this offensive line. I mean, the success of Notre Dame in 2024 offensively kind of hinges on what the offensive line does, Bryan, and who they decide is going to be the right tackle, the left guard, and how well all five play together. Bottom line. And these are all Joe Rudolph guys at this point. And so this is a crucial year for Joe Rudolph.
Joe Rudolph's one, and now Washington's the other. Not okay. That it's just who you excited to see. So this isn't like a pressure one. I'm excited to see what Al Washington is going to do with his D-line.
Sure.
And I'm also excited to see what Mike Brown's going to do with the wide receivers.
That's my second one. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I don't even know that like I would necessarily as you were, my initial reaction, Vince, was the same as yours. But as you start talking, I just like read through the question and I was like, well, excited to see. I don't know that I'm excited to see Joe Rudolph line. It's more of I don't know what we're going to see, more of a anxiousness.
Yeah, that's fair.
When I think of excitement, I start thinking about the receivers and the D-line and what
there's
I'm
a lot of
hoping
talent there
that they're going to be this season. Those are the two that I'm probably most excited to see with their groups this year.
Right. Makes sense.
Lucky Duck 512, guys. I think you missed my other super chat cheers. Yeah, we just hadn't quite gotten to those yet. I'm sorry. I hadn't scrolled down and seen those, so we did. Thank you for that awareness. We do have a couple of them that I want to get.
But thanks for that super chat.
Appreciate that. Yes, Ryan Elliott super chat. Good show, boys. Man, I'm ready for some football. Us too, buddy. Us too. Now let's get to Lucky Ducks question, Vince.
There we go. Lucky Ducks. Thanks again for the super chat. Rockney was an innovator back in the day. What are some things you wish Notre Dame would be more innovative in the modern era? For example, sports medicine or things of that nature.
Well, one thing I've said a lot in the past, Vince, is I would love to see Notre Dame be an innovator when it comes to sort of the sports psychology aspect of the game, and not so much like the how to help them be better football players, but more so how are we helping these young men deal with all that's in front of them now? Because like we talk about all the craziness of the sport, there's NIL, there's all these crazy things, social media. There's so much stuff these kids have to deal with, Vince, that you and I didn't have to deal with when we were in high school and college, that it's just like there needs to be people there making sure that these kids are handling these things well. I would love to see Notre Dame be innovative when it comes to being proactive they may be doing this. I don't know that they are or aren't. These are just things that pop in my head. I would love to see them be more innovative when it comes to making sure that they're helping with financial planning for these young men, so that hey, listen, we're going to make sure that you're not getting screwed over by people. We're going to help you guys with good investment strategies. We're going to make sure you guys are tax compliant with all of you. I mean, there's so many things that I would love to see Notre Dame take advantage of what you have on campus. You know, you could even tie it into sort of internships or with other programs, like so students on campus that are starting things like, hey, you know, we're gonna work with the football team to help them with these sort of things. And so now you're helping some of your, I don't know if they have like accounting or things like that, or, business ethics, things along those lines that they could then incorporate those programs into either have students help in that regard as part of an internship, or make sure that players are taking those classes.
Right.
And as part of those classes, they're then, applying their own NIL world to that. So those are type of things where, making sure that we're helping these young people, because it is not a sign of weakness for a man to need help getting through a tough time. It's not. Now, are you someone who's just constantly triggered and offended and always hurt? Your feelings are always hurt. Okay, you are a little too emotional. Okay, but a young man loses a parent, loses a friend or a family member. Okay, we're there for that, but like there's just so much being thrown at these young men and so much expectations of them and just so much just worldliness being thrown at them that we were sheltered compared to where these kids were when we were teenagers. We need to make sure that we're doing things to help these young men to not only thrive in this environment financially and with all those type of things, but also emotionally. Like young people, like I don't know how I would have dealt with social media when I was 18 years old and people jumping. I mean, some of the stuff people have sent me as an adult, I'm like, wow, like, okay, you're an idiot, but like I'm 40 in my 40s. How would I have felt when I was 18 if that's all I knew?
Sure.
And I viewed, like, you and I know that most people aren't on Twitter. You and I know this. Most people we know aren't on Twitter.
Correct.
But a lot of young people, they think that's the world. They think that's what's out there. And so when people say things to them, it can hurt them. Are we doing enough to make sure that we're helping them deal with those type of things? And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, like soldiers, one of the biggest tragedies that I think we have as a country is our soldiers who go fight on our behalf don't get the proper help when they get back dealing. And I've seen this with my own family, dealing with PTSD. Now there's things out there, but it's got to be so much more. And how we treat them when they come back from war. I mean, athletes go through a less life-threatening, but a similarly traumatic experience, especially when they leave the sport. Vince, a lot of these kids, when they leave Notre Dame, they're not playing football anymore. And so, like, a lot of kids aren't prepared to handle that. Are we doing enough to make sure that we're helping equip these young people for success on and off the field? Those are areas where I would love to see Notre Dame be innovative. And they may very well be, Vince. I don't know that they're not.
Right.
But these are things where I'd like to see, like there's like the cooking class that they do. That may not seem like a whole lot, but I was talking to my mom about this the other day. My wife's out of town for a week. Every time my wife goes out of town, my mom's first question is, what are you cooking? You know what I mean? Because I know
what you're cooking today.
Yeah, but I was raised like from a very young age to learn how to cook and do laundry. Because my mom was like, yeah, it'd be great if you got married. My parents were teenagers when they got married. Well, my mom was. They were 19 and 20. They were 22 and 23 when they had me. But they were like, hey, look, if you get married young, great. But, my mom was always like, but you're going to be a husband that knows how to do things. You know what I mean? You're going to be a husband that knows how to cook and knows how to help the wife run the house when that is needed. But also, if you don't get married, I want to make sure that you know how to take care of yourself. And so that's how I was raised. And so Notre Dame taking these young men and they're teaching them culinary stuff. That may seem fun, but that's practical. So when they're home or they're doing it, they're going to have tools and trips and tricks and tips to say, you need to make sure you're taking care of your body. And we're going to help you better prepare for that. So there's no excuse now for you to eat cheeseburgers all summer because you know how to make meals now, right?
Right.
But then that also helps them practically when they go get, when they become, men. Some of these guys aren't going to have spouses early on, or they maybe don't have spouses that are very good at cooking, or maybe their spouses have busy lives and busy jobs, or maybe they just love to cook and they can prepare a meal for their family. So, but those are practical things that help them far beyond the football field. And I would love to see Notre Dame be innovative in more and more of those things that are really helping young men be successful there. I don't know that I really care as much about being innovative schematically and things along those lines. I don't really care as much about that because some of the most innovative coaches, Mike Leach should be Hall of Famer. I'm in favor of the push to make him Hall of Famer because he fell like 2 wins short of the cutoff for being a Hall of Famer. Like, yeah, because he passed away. Like, he would have easily gotten there. Mike Leach was an innovator, like a genius football coach. Never won a national championship. I don't think he even played for a national championship, right? Like,
yeah, no.
Just being innovative doesn't equal championship. Nick Saban wasn't innovative. He was just wicked smart and really good at what he did. But, they had some unique things that they did, but I wouldn't call them like innovative per se. They weren't, like Rich Rod was with, the spread offense that he ran at Glenville State and eventually took to Clemson. Obviously the air raid for Hal Mummy, and then Mike Leach took it to Mike Leach's version of the air raid is even better than Hal Mummy, even though I believe Mike Leach is a disciple of Hal Mummy, I believe, but Mike Leach is like, okay, I'll take what you did. I'm going to make it more practical and way better. But they win championships, right? So innovation in those regards don't matter a whole lot to me. I think it's more important to be innovative in some of those other areas. All right, so let's get to some more questions here. That's a good one there. Lucky Duck, do we have any super chats? I think we're good there. Okay. John Leahy, which first-time starter do you think is going to have the most success, and who do you think could be replaced before the season ends? Which week one starter do you think is going to have to be? So first-year starters. So let's go with guys that are starting not for the first time at Notre Dame, but just first-time starters, period. Let's see here. Let's go with I'm going to go Jeremiah Love on offense because I don't count starting in a bowl game as being a first-time starter. So let's go with Jeremiah Love on offense. And on defense, I'm going to go with Drake Bowen. Those are my two on offense and defense. And who could be replaced before the end of the season? If Tosh Baker starts at right tackle, I could see that. If Pat Coogan starts at left guard, I could see that. Those are the two on offense most likely to be replaced. On defense, I don't think it's as much about. I don't think it's as much about guys being replaced as starters, because on defense, you're going to see much more rotating. So if RJ Oben starts at big end or if Josh Burnham does, I don't think that matters a whole lot, to be honest with you. I don't think that's going to matter a whole lot, to be honest with you. And some people point to the receiver doesn't matter a whole lot to me either, because there's going to be a rotation. And somebody said, Bo Collins might get replaced by Cam Williams. They don't even play the same position, so that's unlikely. Bo Collins is going to be more of a boundary. Cam Williams is more of the field Z. So I don't see that one's going to be the case. But in that situation, I don't even see that, to be completely honest with you. I think it's going to be more of a, Bo is like, for example, I'll just use your example to make my case. Bo's the starter. He's entrenched as the starter. Cam's come along playing great, or Micah Gilbert, whoever you want to use. They would work that guy in, and then maybe that younger guy is in some more clutch situations, but it doesn't change the starting lineup aspect of it. So I don't, I don't care as much about that on defense. I don't know. Trying to think of who might be replaced. The only one I can really think of would be Jordan Pataho, and I hope that that's not the case, because I'm hoping that the light goes on for Jordan Pataho, but he could be one that could possibly find himself a little bit on the chopping block, so to speak, when it comes to a starting position at Notre Dame. Got a super chat. Actually, I'm going to wait till Vince comes back to answer that one, because I know he'll want to answer that one. So here's one from Andrew Gilmore that's more specific to me. I don't know that I'm able to answer this one a whole lot. Andrew Gilmore says, Brian, you brought up Peyton Manning going to the Broncos. If Manning never got hurt and the Colts didn't draft Luck, would Tim Tebow have been the Broncos starting quarterback in 2012? Honestly, I can't even. I don't remember far enough back to be able to answer that question for you, to be completely honest with you. Would Tim Tebow have been starting quarterback? Let me go look and see what the Denver Broncos roster was back in 2012, because I've kind of, that period of time was a little strange for me. So there's a lot from 2012 that I don't. I couldn't pay attention to a lot of things. I just kind of got back into coaching and things along those lines. But let me just see some Broncos statistics. Who were this? You had, Brock Osweiler probably would have been the starter in 2012.
Because was it a direct handoff from Tebow to Manning?
As far as
like starter to starter, like was it a direct, like he came right after? Because I don't remember exactly what the
sort of. It was kind of Tebow and Kyle Orton were the
Okay.
two quarterbacks
Okay.
before. Yeah, and I still laugh that they thought that Kyle Orton might be a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Well, he was good at the Bears.
Yeah,
so.
Tebow started most like 2/3 of the games in 2011, and Kyle Orton started some other games. But that was the year they kind of let's see if Tebow can be the guy or not, and he couldn't. What's funny is Tebow actually won games that year.
He did.
So I just pulled it up. Denver
won a playoff game.
Denver went 7-4 that year in games that Tebow started. They went 1-4 in games that Kyle Orton started. And I believe Kyle Orton started the season. I believe Kyle Orton started the season as the starting quarterback, and Tebow took over. And then that is the year, Vince, that Tim Tebow threw that touchdown pass to Demaryius Thomas in overtime against the Steelers.
Yes, I remember that. Okay.
Now, they got destroyed the next round by the Patriots.
Well.
But it just was obvious that, he can win you some games, but he wasn't going to win you a championship.
Sounds familiar.
And then when Peyton Manning took over, it's like, just kind of, so maybe Tebow stays. I doubt it. I mean, I doubt he would have been the guy.
They would have been looking for somebody else, whether that
the Broncos
drafted Brock, or not.
Yeah, the Broncos drafted Brock Osweiler in the second round of the draft that year.
Good point.
And they actually remember Peyton kind of got benched in 2015, and Brock Osweiler started some games late in the year, if you remember, Vince. And then they brought Peyton off the bench against the Chargers at the end of the season, and then they won that game, and then he started in the playoffs. So because he just was having a hard time just throwing the ball with the neck or some of the injuries and stuff. So Brock Osweiler. I mean, maybe they'd have brought Tebow back, maybe, but Tebow would have only, if he would have come back in 2012, it would have been in until Brock Osweiler's ready.
Sure. Yep, exactly.
Type of situation. So I don't know that it would have been.
He would have been a bridge, and they would have been trying to prepare whoever the next guy would be. And you're probably right. Probably would have been Brock. And they would have then moved on from Tebow. So maybe it wouldn't have been as quick.
Even when they signed Peyton, they were preparing for a contingency plan in case Peyton couldn't throw.
Sure.
There was still
that was a legit concern when they signed him. I mean, that was
right.
Yeah, that was legit.
Right. So, I don't. That's partly why I would assume why Osweiler was drafted was because of that.
Yeah, agreed. And they knew Peyton Manning wasn't going to be there for a decade. I mean, there was going to be an end to his tenure, right? I mean, he was kind of a rental piece, impressive rental piece, but still, nonetheless, he wasn't your long-term solution.
Right.
So, Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate it. Sup, IB, Coach, and Mr. Vince. Have you guys played NCAA 25 yet? Add me, AL, his gamer tag. PS5 lair like bear, so a lair 1010. Anyways, have a great day, IB Nation. So the answer is yes, I have played it. Not as much as I would have liked, because life kind of gets in the way a little bit. But I can tell you right now, the first time I left was to tell my son to turn it down in the other room, because he's currently on his road to glory and playing it, and has lost some hours of sleep over the last week or so because he's been playing it. And since it's summer, I don't care. But, so yes, it has been played in our house numerous times, not always by me. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I've played it, not as much as I would like. Not as much as I was like, but I've played it. Yeah, I played a little bit last night. I got done with some articles, and I was like, I wasn't tired yet. So I was like, I'll just play a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, won a Heisman Trophy with CJ Carr. So,
nice.
Yeah,
CJ working it.
Yeah, just it's been fun. Yeah, I built my own playbook and all that kind of stuff. I haven't I'm not playing anyone. I built a team, an Irish breakdown team, Vince. Unfortunately, I don't know how to
shut your mouth.
I don't know how to I created the uniform. I just don't know how to add it. I don't know how to.
Oh, well, that might be something we're gonna have to talk about when I get over there.
Yeah.
Because you can upload it to whatever, and then you can then search for it and then download it or whatever, and that's going to need to happen. I need to play with the Irish breakdown team. That absolutely needs to happen. I take them to some glory.
Well, I did that. I uploaded it here. Let me see if I can find it. But I did what is it? It's Team Builder.
Team Builder.
Right?
I'm having all kinds of trouble with Team Builder. I can't load up
it
logos.
Made me say I had to pay to use it or something like that, and I was like, well, it's kind of lame. So I'm gonna see if I can sign in here because I'll show you my uniform that I created.
Mine just spins when I try to upload a logo. It just spins, and I can never get past uploading a logo. And so that's really been frustrating for me.
Yeah, let me show you the uniform that I built, Vince.
I'm excited to see this.
So let me see here. Where's mine? Let me see. This my team's. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to share this with you, and I don't know if I can like do it to where other people can use it or not. I don't know how that works.
You can.
But here's what I have. So let me go here. So here's my uniforms. It's IBU Nationals, like IB Nation. You get it? So let me see if it pulls up here. It's just for now. It's just spinning. So once I get it up, oh, here we go. All right. So here's I got. So this is the jersey. Let me pull this down. So that's let me go to preview here. So that's the.
Oh, you went checkerboard. You went checkerboard. Yeah. All right.
No, hold on a second. Let's go back to here. I want to see the jersey uniform. So this is the home uniform. See that? Well, nice. kind of simple. Yeah. A little bit of gold, some green, some blue.
I'm all about simple.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of sharp. And this is the away uniform.
You went all white
right here.
You went with the dark pants. Okay. Yep. A little green accents.
I wasn't sure I was going to like the gold jersey, but I kind of dig that, to be honest with you. So
the numbers, you mean?
Yeah. Yep. So I was like, how's the gold going to look with that? But that's that. You can see the helmet, the IB logo on the helmet.
You got any alternates?
You got a home alternate.
Oh, little green top. Okay.
Yeah. So I tried to do another alternate, but it started acting funky and wouldn't let me do it. I wanted to do one with a blue jersey and a green pants, and then a blue jersey, but it kept messing up. And then it gave me a Nike jersey for some reason, and it wouldn't let me switch to Under Armour. It was acting funky.
Oh, gotcha.
So those are my alternate uniforms, Vince.
Yeah, we're gonna have to figure out how to get that because I'm gonna write that down. It's IBU. Okay, got it.
And I downloaded it, I saw it on there, so I don't know if it's
because then, Brian, the fun part is if you're gonna start a dynasty with them, you can go in and change the names of the people.
Yeah, so I tried to do it, and it was it said I had to pay in order to use Team Builder. I had to pay some fee or something. And I was
that's nuts.
Yeah. Yep. So I was like, well, that's lame. So I buy the game, but I can't then make my own team unless I pay more for it.
Yeah.
So
no.
Yep. So that's kind of that was my shot at. I couldn't sleep the other night, so that was my crack at.
Exactly. That's exactly how it goes.
I finished those uniforms at 3:00 in the morning. So, but yeah, I thought they were pretty sharp, man.
Absolutely.
I thought they were pretty sharp. So,
I'm definitely down. Those guys are going to get downloaded for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. So anyway, but so somebody said you don't have to pay. I don't know how to do it otherwise. I tried to go to my team and use it, and it said that I had to pay. So
That's nuts.
So if I don't have to pay, Siggy, then could you maybe email me how to use it, without doing it? Because so I don't know, Vince, if you can look for it and see if it's if you can find it and you can use it. That's cool.
Yeah, we'll discuss. We will discuss. I'm looking forward to it. That'll be one of the things we can talk about tonight.
I think it was one of the the stadium. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So which stadium did you end up using?
Wisconsin's.
Okay.
I thought the layout was good and the size was good, but the thing that sucked is I couldn't figure out a way, Vince, to put words in the end zone. It would only let me do designs.
Really?
Yeah. I'm sure you can, but again, I'm 46 and I've never done this before. So right. I probably was doing it wrong. So that's why I went the checkerboard thing in the end zone.
Gotcha.
Just because I just figured that was probably the best way to do it. And I was like, okay, I'm over trying to figure this out. I'm over it. So I just went with the checkerboard and moved on. So
yeah, I get that.
Yep. That's where I'm at. So anyway, so I've played it and I do more stuff like that and recruiting and all that other kind of stuff than I do.
Right.
Than I do, the,
actually
playing it,
random, yeah.
Because then I can do that. I can simulate a season to get to recruiting or get to the while I'm working.
Good point.
Is my life.
Good point.
Such is my life. All right, let's get back to some questions, Vince. So that we did bring that one up from Charlie. Thank you very much for that super chat, Charlie. I appreciate that. All right, we got a two-parter.
Oh, I like two-parters. All right, here we go from Wyatt Kierwin. I watched the Manti Te'o documentary. What a cruel, horrible situation for such a great kid to go through. Could not agree more. More or less ruined his life for years. Do you know if there is any way to reach out to Manti? I want him to know that he will always be a Notre Dame legend and Irish Nation will always love him.
I'm sure there's ways that, through his agent stuff that you can reach out, but I will say this. I was worried about how Manti felt about his Notre Dame legacy because after all that happened, we didn't see Manti back at Notre Dame very often. I don't remember ever seeing Manti, and I do believe he was on a couple times. He kind of came on, didn't just announce it, but it was last year, I think, Vince, or was it 2022? Last year, I forget which game it was. It might have been 2022, actually.
I thought it was 23, but it all runs together.
I thought it might have been like the Cal game in 22, but I forget whenever it was. But he came back for a game.
And it was awesome.
And the fans were so awesome to him.
He cried. I mean, it was tears.
And it wasn't just at the stadium, but like I watched him speak beforehand with Freeman. And I'm pretty sure actually it was 2022 because I'm remembering now Freeman had like the screen coat on. And they brought Manti out and he spoke in front of this crowd over towards the library.
Okay.
And the crowd just went nuts, man. And you could just see he was moved. I mean, you can tell when someone's like, "Oh, thank you," but you could tell when someone's like, "Oh my gosh, like I was not expecting this."
Yeah.
And I thought that was important that Notre Dame fans, give him that kind of love, and
rightfully so. He's probably thought for a long time that he's kind of on his own. You know what I mean? Just based on the media whiplash and everything that went down, and I mean. He was the butt of every joke on the planet for years, and it sucked. I mean, it just did. But him being able to come back and see that Notre Dame is still Notre Dame, and I mean that in all the good, positive ways that Notre Dame is Notre Dame was. I think that was needed, honestly, for him. I really do, and you could tell that he was emotional about it, which was really cool to see.
Yeah,
I mean, it was awesome. That was one of my better moments sitting in the stadium.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Outside of football.
And you see him now, he's got a wife, he's got a kid, and you just remember these guys,
they're human
guys are
beings.
people, right? I mean, they are. And they have, it's like, I still, I covered Stephon Tuitt's recruitment. I remember him as a teenager. I remember talking to him as a teenager. And then, you remember him playing at Notre Dame. And then I don't see Stephon again until he comes back a couple years ago at a camp, and he's, he hadn't retired yet, but he's getting close to retirement. And he's walking this is in the Joyce, and not Joyce, but this is in Loftus. And he's got a stroller with a kid in it. And then there's another kid he's holding, and his wife is with him. And I'm just like, that's not the kid that I remember. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
It's just, he's dad now. I mean, it's wild to see how that goes. And we sometimes forget that, like, just some of the things I see people tweet it. I'm like, man, you got a sad life. You got a really sad life, but, sometimes people deserve harsh treatment, but it's not because of what they do on the football field.
Right.
It's like, you're a pretty bad person, and what you did is like, you deserve to be, but, it's like, who's the tight end from Ohio State that dropped that pass in the against Texas in 2005? I legitimately got death threats. It's like, you suck at life if
that's
a football
up,
game
man.
is going to, but Notre Dame fans aren't past that. I mean, some there's, and I don't think that's like the vast majority of Notre Dame fans are not those kind of people. I don't think. It's just there's that small minority of very obnoxious losers.
Yep.
That feel
and
the
every fan base has them.
Yes, and every time Deuce Knight, every time Deuce Knight, there's some new BS rumor about Deuce Knight's going to visit here. There's some Notre Dame fan that's going to jump in Deuce's DMs and say something stupid.
Yep.
And you're just like, yep. And you hope that most kids realize most fans are not that way. The vast majority of Notre Dame fans are like, hey, man, we love you, blah, blah, blah. But, just always got those idiots. And some fan bases have more than others.
Right.
So there's one to our north and one to our southeast, not that far southeast, that have a lot of those, northeast and southeast. And then they play each other every year,
In case you didn't know who you were talking about.
Just want to be clear. Just want to be clear.
Just in case there was some ambiguity with that statement.
Just want to be clear.
Sorry, that was great.
It's okay.
John Marks, excluding Rocket and Jeremiah Love, which past and present player would you like to see as a Percy Harvin role in the Notre Dame offense? Love you guys. Love you too, John.
Which past and present? I mean, you took out my favorite, obviously Rocket. That was a pretty good one. There's been some other receivers that have been like that. I mean, Golden Tate could have done a lot of that.
Yes.
Golden Tate rushed for 2,000 yards as a junior in high school. Like Golden could have done a lot of that kind of stuff. There's no doubt. Golden could have been that kind of guy. There's a couple David Givens could have been like that when he was at Notre Dame. He could have definitely done some of that kind of stuff. He wouldn't have been as dynamic. Somebody in the chat said Ricky Waters. It's a very good one. Ricky would have been really good in that role.
That's true, because he played both receiver and running back.
Yeah. Armando Allen would not have been good in that role post high school injury, because Armando was not the same sudden athlete he was when he was younger. But if Armando didn't have that devastating leg injury in high school, he would have been a good answer for that one.
Braden Lindsey could have been maybe something along those lines.
I mean, when we saw that Chip Long used him that way in 2019, and then when Chip left, I mean, you saw how Braden Lindsey in 2019 scored on a jet sweep, a screen, and deep balls.
Right.
In all those different ways.
Yeah.
And then they just, after Chip left, they either didn't know how to use him or didn't care how to figure out a way to use him.
Either way, travesty.
Really good one, Vince. That's a really good recent one. Very good recent one. I always felt Avery Davis should have been used a little bit more, because he was a quarterback. Like I'm still pissed that this kid played 5 years at Notre Dame and never threw a pass as a receiver.
Right.
It's not even that he played quarterback in high school, Vince. You recruited him to play quarterback. He played quarterback in his first spring at Notre Dame. I have a picture of Avery Davis in throwing motion in a Notre Dame uniform as a freshman, and they never used him on any kind of play like that. It's just like, you're lame.
No, there's a lot of former quarterbacks, from high school that are on Notre Dame's team over the past and even currently that aren't playing quarterback at Notre Dame. I mean,
So somebody mentioned Chris Tyree. I don't know that Chris Tyree would have been like Percy. Chris Tyree should have been used differently. Chris Tyree's more fast than he is shifty.
Yeah, straight line speed.
Yeah, reverses, jets, those are things that he should have done more of, but I don't know if I would use him as much on the ways that that Percy was. But similarly, somebody else mentioned, Vince, I think is a really good one in the chat, was where was that? CJ Procise, Joe Marciano, CJ Procise. I think that's a good one.
Sure.
I think that's a good one.
As far as the current roster, I think Faison kind of fits that mold to a degree.
Maybe.
I think he's good in space with his lacrosse background. I mean, seeing some of the things he did in lacrosse was like,
I worry about his body type holding up.
Because he's smaller. I get that. I would definitely not like run him between the tackles or anything like that, but definitely give him an end around, give him, some different things where the ball gets into his hands, specifically.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, other than that, Jaden Harrison would be a really good one. Actually, he'd probably be my pick of the current receivers.
That's fair, because he's got a little bit more quote unquote armor, and
he's more dynamic. And he has a little bit of a running back body.
Yes, exactly correct.
And he's really dynamic.
Yeah,
really dynamic athletically. I don't know how good of a football player he is, but he's really dynamic.
You know what? I was impressed when I saw the ball in his hands in spring. I'm very curious to see how Mike, because I just have a feeling that he's a little bit of a revelation for Mike Denbrock. It's like, this is kind of a neat shiny toy that I can kind of play around with a little bit offensively. You know what I mean? Because they brought him in to be a return man.
That too.
Who's that?
I think KK Smith could be that too.
So it'll be interesting. I could see Jaden Harrison paving the way for KK like in the future. You know what I mean? Like you see Jaden kind of getting those carries or touches this year, and then KK steps into that role next year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Good questions.
Patrick Ribble, do you think Rudolph and Freeman will give Lambert an actual chance at being the starting left tackle if he earns it, Or will it be like Brian Kelly days where we don't see young players for a year? It'd be right tackle, first of all.
Well, I mean, either one. Look, Marcus Freeman literally has experience playing young freshmen at most positions. I don't. Just because a young guy doesn't play doesn't mean he's like Brian Kelly.
Right.
If Charles Jagasol is the best player for one of the two tackle jobs, he'll play. I have no doubt. Will he get an actual chance at being the starting left tackle? I mean, that's more of a fair question. And look, we have evidence that I'm not sure that he will, and that's with Billy Schrouf last year. I mean, so we've seen that. We've seen, and I've explained, O-line coaches tend to just be that way. That's just, and it's understandable to a degree. I less get like comparing it to Brian Kelly. I think that's a little bit unfair because lineman is a whole different animal than why didn't Braden Lindsey play as a freshman, or why didn't Kevin Austin play as a freshman, or why didn't Xavier Watts play more? Chase Claypool. Like I still remember talking to parents of players in 2020. And they'd be like, dude, this kid, number 82 on offense, is just killing our defense every week. Like, they were concerned about, like, the defense that year in spring and fall practice because, like, they'd say, like, the first-team defense would just get torched by Xavier Watts. Never gave him a chance to play. So, I mean, that was an issue with Brian Kelly. We have not seen that from Marcus Freeman. I mean, Notre Dame's number 2 leading rusher last year was a true freshman.
Right.
Notre Dame's number 2 leading pass catcher, number 3 leading pass catcher last year was a true freshman. Part of that out of necessity that Marcus Freeman's first year, he had a freshman All-American cornerback. So I mean, we've seen freshmen play plenty when they earned it at Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman. Now, will that be true on the offensive line? That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that, Patrick. I think that O-lineman is a place where and quarterback is a place where coaches tend to be a little bit more conservative in general. And that's true for a lot of coaches, not just Brian Kelly or Marcus Freeman. But I think every talented player should be given a legitimate chance to compete for a position. And I don't know that Joe Rudolph necessarily did that last year, if I'm being completely honest with you. And we'll find out if he's able to do that again this year, or if Gerby's going to get a legitimate chance. Yeah, but it's going to be tough. If Emil Wagner does in fall camp what I think he's going to do,
right.
It's going to be tough for Gerby, to be honest with you.
And look, he wasn't here in the spring, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but coming in the summer and then, just practicing in the fall, it's going to be tough. There's some, and I don't want to say established, but obviously there's guys that have been on this roster who know this offense, who, Joe Rudolph knows a lot better than Gerby Lambert as far as being a player under his tutelage. That's all going to be part of it. You know what I mean? And in order for Gerby Lambert to start, he is going to have to be markedly better than everybody else, in my opinion. I really do think, like, it's going to have to be a point where, Rudolph goes into Marcus Freeman's office like, we got to play this kid. Like, we don't have a choice. He's better than everybody we've got. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I see this going down if Gerby Lambert ends up being the starter. He's going to have to, if it's close, they're going to go with the kid who's been on the roster. If it's, he's just going to have to be so much better. That's the way I see it playing out. And is that possible? Of course it's possible. I mean, if he's just going out there whooping tail every time he gets a chance, then he'll play. Like, coaches aren't stupid, at least most. I mean, yeah. So, but he's just going to have to be really, really good. And that's possible. We'll see. Chen Boat. IB Nation. I'm reminiscing about 2 days.
First of all, check out my man's avatar. He's got an IB hoodie on. So respect.
Oh, I do see that.
My man. So
that's well done.
Yes.
That's well done. I'm reminiscing about 2 days in high school. Was wondering if you guys had any stories about some crazy coaches that you played for. I had one coach, Olson. He would bare headbutt people's helmets. Oh, that's back in the day right there.
Yeah. I didn't have any crazy coaches. I just had some bad coaches. I had some bad coaches. Hey, there was one coach I had in college at Salisbury. And he wasn't crazy. He was like, he wasn't crazy. Like, he didn't act crazy. He was a linebackers coach, but he just kind of carried himself, Vince, as that, like, I don't know if I would want to mess with this guy.
Yeah.
And then he left after a year or two coaching with us at Salisbury. He left and joined the Secret Service. And you're like, yep, okay. I always knew that guy wanted to kill people. You know what I mean? Like, I knew this guy's a little nuts, but he's actually a pretty good dude. But
yeah.
I didn't have I didn't have any crazy coaches. There's, like I said, I had some bad ones.
Yeah, I didn't have any crazy coaches. You know, we had coaches we liked and coaches we didn't like. I mean, that's very clear. But it's funny though, your perception of your coaches when you're in high school is completely different once you get older and become a coach yourself. So we had one coach who at the time when I was in high school was a young defensive line coach, and he would go and lift with the kids and, like, you know, take them on the short bus to, like, the gym, and always walk around with his shirt off, and got in trouble with the nuns because he was always walking around with his shirt off, like, just like pumping iron all the time. And he just seemed like a meathead. You know what I mean? Well, fast forward about 15 years, I'm his offensive coordinator as he was a head coach now. You know what I mean? And, like, the guy, X's and O's wise, is a freaking genius. You know? And so it's interesting your perception as a kid and then when you're an adult. And so some of the coaches I didn't like as a kid, I have a ton of respect for now as an adult, because I see what they were doing. Like, I understand it now that I'm an adult and I'm a coach now, right? And so it's just interesting. You know, so I didn't have anybody that was crazy. I went to Catholic school. I mean, it's, you know, it is what it is. But a lot of great guys
on that one.
a lot of good men in retrospect. You know what I'm saying? As I got to know them as adults. You know, so there you go. I'll stick with that. We didn't have any priests as our coaches, Brian. All right, Tommy Guns.
I was thinking more the nuns, like whacking you in the hand.
Oh, yeah. I got my knuckles wrapped a few times in elementary school. I know that shocks you. All right, Tommy Guns. Carson quickly became a hashtag IB Nation fan favorite with his segment of Carson's Corner. Are there any 26 guys that you could see doing something similar? If so, who might that be?
No, I mean, we're just not in a place right now to be able to even have those relationships. You know, because Ryan's known he was going to leave for a month. And so obviously he was doing a good job, but it's like he wasn't looking to build those long-term relationships. Sure. And, you know, right now with where we are with everything, it's just not I don't see that being the case right now. And honestly, the further we get into this, more and more, if any, the next kid we would even want to do something like that would probably say, what are you going to pay me?
Good point.
Right. Which honestly, you know,
don't have a problem with, but
should ask it. I mean, that wasn't something that I sought out. You know what I mean? And I made sure that was very clear right away. Like, look, I'm not, like, you can do this, but we're not, this isn't some NIL thing.
Yeah.
Right? If he wants to come on, that's fine. Good for him. You know, it's awesome. And he did a great job. Carson's a very entertaining young man.
No doubt.
But it just wasn't something that I was going to be part of. So.
Just your ordinary Joe. What are the top 3 to 5 differences between quote unquote camp and quote unquote practice? And why does there seem to be such an emphasis on the distinction?
It's what you're working towards.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to,
That's a good
Joe.
way to say
it. When you're practicing, you're getting ready for an immediate payoff, so to speak, of what your preparation's geared towards. So, you know, it's, hey, we've got to go win a game on Saturday. So we've got to prepare as such. So everything we're doing is geared towards game planning and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Camp is about laying the foundation to be in position to do that during the season. So it's a lot of, I mean, yes, you're implementing scheme and doing all that, but there's a level of, we're doing a lot more teaching in fall camp. We're doing a lot more competition in fall camp. We're doing a lot more, you know, testing. There'll be things that are maybe not geared towards going out and playing a game on Saturday. It's geared more towards team building or competition or learning or things along those lines. So it's like, Joe, it's like building blocks, right? I mean, you've got to start somewhere. You know, you don't lay a foundation of a house and be like, all right, you have a house, but hard to have a house if you don't have that foundation.
Correct.
Right. And so that's really what the difference is. It's all practice.
Sure.
But when you put them into the boxes as you did properly, Joe, by the
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
Joe also has an IB shirt on in his avatar, by the way. This is, you know who this is, right, Vince?
100%. Yes, I
Okay.
do.
So it's just more towards the biggest difference is what one is you're preparing for a season, the other is you're preparing specifically for a game.
And holistically, that is absolutely 100% accurate from a different, not a different perspective, but just, I guess, looking at it a little bit differently. Camp is more physical usually too. And things have changed as time has gone on. It has changed a little bit, but generally you kind of get the crap kicked out of you a little bit in camp, trying to figure out who's going to be where and who is willing to sacrifice their bodies and, all of those different things. And then once the season starts, you definitely take a step back from the major physicality, right? You might have one day of hitting, that kind of a thing during the week. In camp, you're hitting every day for a while, and then they taper it back once you get about a week and a half, 2 weeks out of the first game. But those first 2 weeks are generally, once they put the full pads on, Bryan, after about practice number 3, they're going at it. And those are the practices, honestly, that are fun to watch, that we're not going to get an opportunity to watch. And so that's the main difference as I look at it from that perspective is once you get into the season, it's very regimented. You do the same thing on Sundays, the same thing on Mondays, same thing on Tuesday, et cetera, as the week goes on, and you're game planning for the game on Saturday. And it all is focused and leading up to that. In camp, it's more general. Like you're learning your stuff, you're building your foundation, you're, putting in the playbook, you're doing all of these things so that when you are in the season, now you can pluck certain things from that foundation that you've built that are more specific to the team that you're playing. And then the physicality is just completely different. It's completely different. I mean, you remember how it was, man. 2-a-days, 3-a-days. Like you used to get the snot kicked out of you, and it was not a cool. I mean,
Oklahoma drills. And,
yeah.
like you remember the movie Rudy? Like this actually would happen in football practices,
Yes.
where a dude would stand in the middle and people would fly at him from all different places. And your goal is he doesn't see me coming, and I lay him out.
Yes, a bull in the ring.
Right. Now some of that you're like, dude, that's not something you should be doing in college, because it's like if you're not tough by the time you get to college but it's really it comes down to it's not only about getting guys used to being hit again.
Sure.
Number one, it's about seeing who's really my warriors, who are my guys that really want to compete, who are my guys that want to be physical, and who are my guys that don't want to be. You'd see those guys in certain one-on-one drills, and it's like 7 on, like, oh, it's we call them half-speed heroes, right? Practice All-Americans, and then they'd get into the Oklahoma drill, and you find out they're really they don't have it.
They don't want the smoke.
They don't. They don't. And then you find out who really does.
Yeah.
And so it's harder to sort of sort those guys out now than it used to be.
That's fair.
To a degree, I understand it. I think especially in college, like I'm okay with there not being any 2-a-days. I think 2-a-days were useless, just for me, because I felt like you're so tired that it's in to practice too, that it's not really practical towards playing through fatigue in the fourth quarter. That's not really the same thing, but it is what it is. So I'm good. Some of that stuff I'm glad. And then so I think it was when I was coaching, they went to the 2-1-2 thing.
Yes.
You couldn't have back-to-back 2-a-days.
That's how it is in high school in Indiana. Yeah.
And then eventually they just completely got rid of 2-a-days. I'm fine with that. I think football is a very much a physical game. I would argue that there needs to be a little bit more time in the week allowed, quote unquote, allowed, than just 20 hours. Because that's workouts, meetings, all that.
Everything.
I think there needs to be more time. It just 20 is not enough. But I would say that I would not necessarily use as much of that. I would add about a half an hour to practice every day of drill work, not bang, bang. If I'd say like if every day I would have practice probably about 30 minutes longer than they have it now. They have to have it the way they do it now, because otherwise you don't have enough time to do meetings and get weight room stuff done in your 20-hour limit. I'd probably add a couple hours, and I would add a half an hour to my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practices, and probably a half an hour of, some sort of walkthrough type of thing that I would want to do.
Right.
I would not use, I would do that, but it would be drill work. It'd be stuff where, I'm teaching the fundamentals.
Fundamental work.
We're going to do, I want to do a walkthrough during this period at the beginning of practice. And I don't have enough time to do that right now because I have to install that in the meeting room. And then we got to kind of learn on the fly. I would love to have that time to kind of sit here and walk through, okay, here's what we're doing. But the problem is a lot of coaches would use that as like, okay, extra hitting time.
Yeah.
And that would defeat the purpose of what they're trying to alleviate from it, which, again, I think some of that is unnecessary. It's kind of like, listen, if you don't like physicality and if you don't, then just don't play football.
I mean, there's a piece of
it's
that.
like,
That's...
you hear things like, so I'm suing the NFL because they didn't warn us about the potential, ramifications of playing football. And I'm like, really? You didn't know that this is probably not good for your body? I knew that when I was a kid, but it was worth it to me.
Yes. You're wearing equipment. You're wearing a helmet and
not even that, Vince. Like, even with all that, if you don't realize that there's potential bodily and mental, like brain injuries that come by playing football, you had brain injuries before you started playing football. Like, who doesn't think, okay, I got a helmet on, but I'm still getting shook. I mean, I knew that as a child. It just didn't matter. I mean, I have a lot of physical ailments from playing football. Now, my shoulder hurts all the time. My knees hurt. If I could go back and do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. As far as playing it, I might have said, hey, I would have played for a better college. I might have transferred here. I might have done, but as far as playing football, I still do it.
Sure.
I'd still do it. I may do it for different coaches, but I'd still do it because it's like, you know what? You get one life to live, man, and I'm going to enjoy it. And I was actually better at baseball than I was football, but football. I loved football, man. It just, there's something about it. And if there's protecting players and then there's overprotecting players to where, I don't know. I think in some ways maybe we're doing more harm than we are good with certain things.
Just your ordinary Joe. I seem to recall the BK had a practice area built, which amounted to an earthen ramp called the Hill. Functionally a small tilted practice field. Is that still in existence?
I don't think it was a field as much as it was something they just had to run up and down.
Yeah. I
don't know where that was.
I was going to say, I know they put in like a sand pit at the practice area, which they still have and they still use. It's like just a lane of sand essentially. And they use that for conditioning and things. I don't know where that was. And I don't know where one would be now. So I'm going to say no, but I don't remember seeing it in the first place. So, and there's not a whole lot of room like actually on the campus at Notre Dame, Bryan. And so I don't know where that would have been in the past, even when BK was there. There's no, like, we live in Indiana, like everything is flat. Like you'd have to build it, obviously. And I just don't know where they would have built it on campus. Unless they went off campus, which is definitely a possibility. There's plenty of places that you can go off campus and run up a hill. But on campus, I'm just not sure where that would have been. John A1, did SMU deserve the death penalty? If they did, has there ever been a program more deserving of the death penalty?
Well, yeah, I think so. Because I hate that expression, death penalty. Because as far as I know, there's only been, 2 human beings that have ever lived that have been raised from the dead. And both of them were due to the same dude, right? Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, and then he rose from the dead. Outside of that, like, death penalty means death. There's no coming back from it.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't give SMU the quote unquote death penalty and then change their minds and let them come back playing football. It was, you're not able to stop what you're doing, and so we're going to stop it for you and get rid of everybody. And when you come back, things are going to be different. And, and they ended up only doing it for 1 year. And I think then SMU chose to do it for a second year because they just weren't ready to have a team, if I remember correctly from watching that video.
They had a team, but they didn't play. Like they practiced for during the second year.
It was like a lot of walk-ons and stuff like that. So no, they did it because they kept getting slapped on the wrist. Now, listen, other schools were doing the same stuff SMU was.
100%.
It's just SMU was more flagrant with it, and
and they were told specifically, like they had other penalties leading up
Yeah.
to it, and they kept saying, "Look, cut it out, stop doing this,"
Right.
and they just kept doing it.
Yeah.
And that was the
and there was some shadiness involved with that too. I mean, they took it. SMU took it to another level. But I mean, like, there was a lot of that stuff going on, man.
Oh my gosh,
like,
yes.
You know, a lot of people deserved the death penalty. It's just that SMU got hammered because they're SMU. They're not supposed to be good at football. They're not supposed to be beating Texas and Texas A&M and Oklahoma. They're not supposed to be playing with those teams. So, you know, they're going to get in trouble. And we see that all the time. What was the one joke? Like, you know, something about, I think it was like about Alabama or something, like, you know, NCAA is going to get real mad and put like Jacksonville State on probation if they don't mess around and stop, you know, cheating. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's punishment to Nebraska kind of thing. But I mean, there's been, I mean, you know, I know Penn State got punished for what they did. I never sat well with me that Penn State as a program got the punishment that they did, because I always feel like a lot of these punishments end up punishing the wrong people.
Yeah, it's the people that are coming up.
Right. It's the players. It's the replacements. It's like, you know, I know he passed away soon afterwards, but like if he would have stayed alive, Joe Paterno would have actually really not suffered any, other than losing his job, would have suffered nothing from that. Penn State suffered incredibly so from that. It's like fire all the people responsible and find the crap out of them, you know, but don't do what you did to the program, because now you're hurting the players. Right. You're hurting the people that had nothing to do with it, unless you find out that all the players knew or something like that. So that's always been kind of my issue with that stuff, Vince, is they tend to do things that hurt the players and not the people actually responsible for the things that are going on. But I'm trying to think of who else might, you know, who deserves the death penalty. I mean, as a program, I don't know that. I mean, nobody that's. I think North Carolina should have got absolutely destroyed
with the
for
whole
what they did,
fake classes and all that stuff. Absolutely, I mean, they got like a slap on the wrist.
That goes because the NCAA is afraid of lawsuits. Like if SMU would have known then what schools know now, which is the NCAA will not fight you in court, and they really don't have a leg to stand on in court. Sadly, that's true, and I don't think that should be the case, because like you agreed to be part of this institution, you agreed to the rules, and when you break the rules and you sue the NCAA, and you're going to win, because again, the NCAA's, you know, just there's a lot of things that just, you know, law outside of the NCAA is going to not favor them. It kind of pisses me off a little bit, but if what would have happened to SMU then happened to SMU now, they would just sue them and hold them up in court, and eventually the NCAA would cower and crawl away into their little hole, like they did with North Carolina, and or the courts would rule in SMU's favor. That's basically what would happen now. So, but like North Carolina went at the very heart of what this is supposed to be about, and what they did to me is way worse than paying players to come play for you. You cheated those student athletes out of a real education. You cheated them out of that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse you can do outside of causing literal physical or, you know, harm to a player than screwing them out of that opportunity. And, you know, creating fake classes, just say, hey, we literally don't care about you as a person. We just care that you can come play football or basketball for us.
Sure.
That's the entire message of what Kirby Smart is teaching, is saying, without saying it, he's very clearly saying, I don't give a crap about you as a young man unless you can help me play football. Because you can go commit crimes. They had a young man die a couple years ago, Vince, in a car wreck. A young man and a young woman, part of their support staff, died in a car wreck. And you're still seeing kids at Georgia get in trouble for those type of things, and not seeing the kind of consequences that you should expect by someone who actually cares about cleaning this stuff up, because he doesn't care. We're going to go out and win football games. You know, if some third string kid who didn't play got in trouble for what Ra Thomas did the first time he got in trouble, he would have been kicked off the team. Coaches love punishing guys that can't play. Love doing that. They love like, oh, we'll treat this guy harshly because he can't play for us. That's why I was respecting Nick Saban. He was honest. He's like, look, you know, suspend this guy, it's going to hurt the whole team. There's other ways to punish guys for certain things, but this is the stuff these kids are doing. It's like, this is dangerous. People are going to lose their lives, you know, and some people just don't care.
Yeah.
You know, just don't care. But those are the people that should be the ones getting them, not people that were paying players. Yeah, it's cheating. Fine them. Maybe, like I've never believed in postseason bans because you're hurting the players, not the people that, you know what I mean? I've said fine it, fire people that are responsible and fine the schools millions of dollars. Hit them where it hurts. Don't do things that hurt the players. And when you don't let the teams play in the postseason, you're hurting the players. Don't let the coaches coach in the postseason then, but still let the players play. But the NCAA is too stupid to do that, which is why we are where we are. We're where we are now because the NCAA is literally just the stupidest group of greedy people I've ever seen in my life. Well, outside of Washington, D.C. They're the stupidest group of people I've ever seen in my life.
Isaac Evans, IB staff being local and seeing the players around, have you noticed a visible change in the physiques of specific position groups, the team, now that we have had 6+ months of Coach Lando's program? I don't run into players.
I did the other day.
Did you?
Yeah. I was at Salsa's with my wife, and I saw it was Junior Tuilamaka, Ben Minnick, Devin Houston, and Armel Mookum.
Okay.
And they looked huge. Now, having said that, these are all young kids that are going to naturally – they might have looked like this if Matt Balis was still here.
Yeah.
I do think that there's a lot of good weight being put on players right now.
That's fair.
That I can see. Now, how will that impact their agility and conditioning? I don't know. We'll find out in camp and when we get in the season. But like Armo Mookum, I'm like, holy moly, that does not look like the kid that was on our podcast. Like, he looked like a giant. I'm like, the only reason I could tell is because in the face you could tell it was Armo Mookum.
Yeah.
But I was like, holy moly, those are big boys. And I see players all the time, Ben, so I don't often feel that way. I was like, okay, they're like really like,
yeah, right.
Like filling out really nicely. Like Armel is not fat at all. He's just big, So
yeah, I just don't run it. Like players don't exactly run in the same circles as me and my family, and so I don't see a whole lot of them, to be perfectly honest with you, out and about. Yeah. So
we were at Salsa's over by
Grape and Main. Grape Road.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Not at the.
They don't come out our way. I mean, why would they?
They should.
Well,
it's much more away from people over this way.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
But kids are more they're about ease of
Oh, of course.
I was. Yeah. I still am to a degree.
Still am, yeah.
Yeah. When my wife's like, let's go out to eat, I'm like, where do you want to go in Granger? Because I don't want to go.
Do you want to go to Salsa's or
Beef's?
Beef O'Brady's?
Like those are your options.
Yeah.
Oh, so true.
Yep.
So true.
Yep. All right. That's a good one.
John A1, position battle upsets. Do they happen? What position battle upsets, if any, would you pick for the 2014?
Yeah, it happened last year. I think it was a little bit of an upset that Pat Coogan was the starting left guard because Billy Schraub ended the spring as the left guard.
Do you remember going to practice and, we would see – because, it's not out of the ordinary for – we see the first 5 periods, for example. It's not out of the ordinary to see somebody who's probably not going to start running with the first team during fall camp. Like, that's a thing. And it's like, oh, Pat Coogan is in at left guard. Okay, cool. And then we come back to another practice. Oh, Pat Coogan's in at left guard. And it just kind of kept happening. It was like, I think this is actually happening. I think it took us all by surprise. Mm-hmm. At least it did me. I was shocked. And that it just, every time we would go, he was still running with the ones at left guard. And I was shocked by that.
Kept waiting for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Kept waiting for it to change.
Right. And it just never did.
They got to be teaching some lesson to Billy Schraub,
Right, exactly. Yes, 100%. Nope, they sure weren't. So
yeah, no, the lesson lasted 9 games. Just sure.
So position battles that are taking place, are there going to be any upsets?
Sure.
Depends on what you consider an upset on the offensive line, for example.
I think there could be another one at left guard.
Okay, so if Emil Wagner starts, is that an upset to you? Yes or no?
No.
Okay.
I don't think either one of those guys starting is an upset because it just depends on about development. I mean, an upset would be like a Don Schuler starting at safety.
Okay.
It would be, KK Smith starting at Z.
Sure.
It would be
starting at Mike.
Deion Colsey starting at Will. Yeah, there you go. I knew you'd love that one.
Yeah.
Upsets would be, I mean, I really can't think of any others that could potentially. I mean, a lot of guys are kind of entrenched.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no one's starting barring injury. No one's starting outside of. Well, I guess Junior Tuilamakere, Boubacar Traore starting at Viper maybe would be an upset. I don't know that that's going to happen though.
Right, but that would be an upset. That would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, like linebacker. I mean, if Jack Kaiser's entrenched, your 2 starting tackles are entrenched, your field safety's entrenched, your boundary corners entrenched, your nickel's literally the only nickel you have on the roster. Receiver, I don't know that there's going to be like if one of Bo Collins, Jaden Thomas, or Micah Gilbert starting the boundary, I don't know that any of those are surprises.
Sure. Micah Gilbert, maybe to a degree.
I mean, he ended the spring as the number 1 boundary.
True.
I mean, now, again, there was no Bo Collins and there was no Jaden Thomas by the end, but, exactly. Yeah, correct. That's a good one, Vince, maybe.
Yeah, that would be one for me. I don't think it's going to happen, but
would like an upset be like Eli Raritan beats out Mitchell Evans? Yeah, that'd be an upset. It's not going to happen, but it would be an upset. So I'm just trying to be realistic. Joe Otting beats out Ashton Craig. That'd be an upset. It's not going to happen, but it'd be an upset.
How about
Josh Burnham? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, how about
Josh Burnham starting at big end would not be an upset for me.
Gotcha.
That I don't view that as an upset. Christian Gray starting at field corner over Jaden Mickey or vice versa is not an upset to me.
Yeah, right.
So how about CJ Carr number 2?
Yeah, is that an upset?
I don't think it'd be an upset. I think that the coach is just waking up and saying, "Hey, we got to make this move and not go with the experienced guy. We got to get ready the guy that's our future. No, don't waste time with."
Agreed.
Yeah, we gotta get the veteran the reps, and he's going to be just look. It's guys, everybody knows who the next quarterback at Notre Dame is going to be. And it's not going to be Steve Angeli. It's either going to be CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie. That's who it's going to be. And I know that. The coaches know that. Trust me, they do. Just make it happen.
Just do it.
I mean, now again, part of that is CJ or Kenny's got to come in the fall camp and actually
take it,
show that they've built on it. But
sure,
arbor. And if Steve beats them out, then great, he beats them out. But don't put him in there just because he's the veteran, and that's what I'm afraid that they're going to do.
Right.
Yep. So, but outside of that, I mean, but again, if I knew who the upsets would be, they wouldn't be upsets.
That's fair.
I mean, that's part of it too. Like surprises. I think those are kind of surprises. I
would say upsets from a fan standpoint, like somebody who that you think that is going to start and then they don't. There's just not a whole lot of those even up for grabs.
Agree.
Yeah. USMA 87. I chuckled at Josh Pate's playoff nightmare prediction. 1, Texas as SEC champ. 2, Final Four is rematches of the SEC championship and the Big Ten championship. That would be a bad look.
I didn't watch that episode. I haven't had time to watch Josh lately, so I don't know why his argument would be that it would be a playoff nightmare.
The
Texas won the SEC championship. I would need context of what he means.
Yeah.
By that. The other one, would it be a nightmare if here's the thing. It'd be a nightmare if that what happened because of a rigged seeding system. But at the end of the day, if the 4 best teams in the country are 2 SEC teams and 2 Big Ten teams, so be it.
Yeah.
Right. So be it. I don't know that that's a nightmare. I think a nightmare scenario would be 3 teams from one league being in the semifinals. That would be a nightmare. So let's say, you've got your SEC and or Big Ten champs, right? They win their quarterfinal game, and then you've got 2 teams from that league were at larges. They both won their first round games and then upset a higher ranked team in the quarters, and then all of a sudden you've got 3 or 4 teams from one league. That'd be more of a nightmare scenario for me. I think the angle he'd probably be looking at is not so much SEC Big Ten dominance, but like more of a, hey, we just had this game.
Right.
And in some instances, it might be the 3rd time they've played.
Yeah, that's true.
So, let's say you and I are correct, and the Big Ten title game is Oregon, Ohio State.
So
they played at Oregon. Yeah. They played in the Big Ten title game, and then they play again. Yeah, that's to me, that would be where I would be sympathetic to Josh. And that may be what he saw.
Sure.
What he meant by that. But that would be the nightmare scenario for me, is like if it's like a repeat. Texas, Georgia could be one. where Texas beats Georgia, let's say Georgia beats Texas in the regular season, Texas beats Georgia in the rematch or vice versa. Doesn't even have to be that way, but they both play each other in the regular season. They play each other in the SEC title game, and then they play each other again in the semifinals.
Right.
That'd be not good.
Right. Agreed.
Because we're just
I don't
seeing
want to
that
see it again. Like it'd just be reruns. It might be a good football game, but do I really want to see it again?
Right. But I won't be upset about it because it will have to be earned. Because the second and third SEC team or Big Ten team or ACC team or whoever would have to win a first round game and a quarterfinal game over a higher seeded conference champ to get there. They will have earned it, but it still wouldn't be for good TV.
It would just suck.
It wouldn't be for good TV.
Yeah,
and I think it would hurt the ratings because I think you'd see a lot of people check out. A lot of people would check out of. A lot of Big Ten fans wouldn't watch if the's no Big Ten team and three SEC teams. Or Big 12,
seen this episode before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
No, that wouldn't be fun. I don't think it'd be a bad look. I just think it would just
Right. Ball Peen Shillelagh. What is a team from each conference that you believe will outperform expectations this season? What teams do you predict will fall short of expectations?
Well, we kind of did this in our
conference
predictions.
Yeah.
It's like he's challenging us to remember what we said.
And there's the rub.
Yeah. The ACC, just kind of off the top of my head, team that I think is going to outperform expectations. I just think Virginia is going to be, I don't think they're going to be great. They may make a bowl game, may not. I just think Virginia is going to be a little saltier than people think they're going to be this year. They were my pick for a team. I know Georgia Tech was your team that's going to fall short of expectations just because of the schedule.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be rough. I mean, I could see Miami not being as good as people think that they're going to be. I think NC State's a team that's not going to be quite as good as people think that they're going to be preseason. Those are two teams in the ACC and another team that I think is going to outperform expectations is Clemson. I think Clemson is going to be a lot better this year than people think. I really like this Clemson team. I could be completely dead wrong about that, but I just do. Big Ten-wise, Vince, a team that's going to fall short of expectations for me, Michigan is going to be one of those teams. I don't think Michigan's going to be as good as people think. Yeah. A team that I think will fall, that will outperform. I still think USC is going to be better than people think. And again, I dislike Lincoln Riley, but I think they've got a very talented roster. And the defensive hires he made this offseason were strong. I mean, they were. And I think DeAnton Lynn's going to be huge for them. Now, does that mean they're going to be a playoff team? I'm not saying that. I just a lot of people don't even have them in their top 25. I definitely think USC is going to finish in the top 25 by the end of the year. Some other teams in the Big Ten that could potentially outperform expectations, Vince. Well, I know one that I think Northwestern's not going to – I don't think they're going to be very good. I think Wisconsin's a team in the Big Ten that I think will fall short of expectations. I think people are assuming they're going to kind of bounce back, and I am not on the Wisconsin hype train. I think they're going to have a challenging season, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Is there a team who are our picks to outperform expectation? I'll tell you what, Purdue could surprise some people this year. Their schedule's brutal, but man, they had a really good offseason. Really good offseason.
I still, we kind of talked about this already, but obviously not on this show. I still like Michigan State. I think they've got a chance to just, maybe it's a year early, but I think they've got a chance to make a little bit of noise. Again, I mean, they're, in the one magazine, I think they were picked 12th, right? I think they could squeak their way into the top half, which, okay, you know what I mean? I think they've got some opportunities. I really like Jonathan Smith as a coach, and I think he might be able to do some things in year one that maybe some people aren't expecting. And he's got a young, dynamic quarterback, and, there's a lot of question marks there. And so maybe they have an opportunity to make some noise.
Yeah. SEC, Vince, teams that could outperform expectations this year in the SEC. I kind of joked when we did this, like there's no such thing as an underrated SEC team. Remember that?
Right.
Because SEC gets constantly
it's like
12 of the top 25 teams are like SEC teams. It's ridiculous. Like Texas A&M was picked to finish 9th in the SEC in the both preseason magazines, actually all three preseason magazines. And yet all three had them ranked, Lindy's and Athlon both had A&M picked 9th in the conference. Both had them ranked in the top 20.
Right. Exactly.
Like basically like almost half the top 20 teams. There's no such thing as an underrated SEC team. Which teams could fall short of expectations? Whichever SEC team doesn't win the championship, because they're all over. Now, in all seriousness, looking at the SEC, some teams that I think are going to fall short of expectations. There's a lot of people that are telling me Georgia's going to go undefeated. I think they're going to fall short of expectations.
Well,
they could still go out and win a championship, though. But regular season wise, I say that kind of jokingly because that schedule's brutal. Ole Miss is one that I don't know what to think about them. They could easily go fall short of expectations because Lane Kiffin hasn't shown he can kind of have back-to-back really good years. When they've been at their best is when they're kind of underrated and underappreciated. It's when they kind of have those surprisingly good years. When people expect them to be good, they have not. Right. Maybe this year changes things, but that's kind of the expectation. They could fall short, but they could also live up to it. Obviously, those are the two options, so it's not like earth-shattering information, but it's just when I look at the SEC, I don't know.
I like
Oklahoma,
Kentucky, but their schedule is brutal.
Yeah, Oklahoma's one. I think a lot of people have in the top 25. I don't think they're going to be a top 25 team.
No, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't trust their head coach. I just don't know that he's all that great of a head coach. Mm-hmm. Great coordinator. I just have not been impressed with him as a head coach.
Yeah. Missouri, somebody in the chat, Missouri's a good one that's going to fall short of expectations. They're not going to be a top 10 team.
Right.
If Florida, this is going to sound crazy, Vince, because, I think if I were a betting man right now, I'd probably say Billy Napier doesn't make it through the season.
They got the toughest schedule in the country.
If they can start off well and go at least 4-1, now that's going to be tough because they play Miami, A&M, at Mississippi State, and UCF in their first four. But if they can start off 4-1, 5-0, and earn a couple early upsets, then I think I actually like Florida's roster this year. I actually think they have some good players, not great players, not good enough to manage that schedule and be a 10-win team. But if they can build some confidence early, I think they're a team that could maybe outperform what people think that they're going. Now 7-5 would be outperforming the expectations. Billy Napier having a job at Florida at the end of the year is outperforming expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Big 12, we haven't done the Big 12 yet, Vince.
No, we haven't.
The team that I think is going to outperform expectations is TCU. I think TCU is going to have a bounce back season. I really do. Teams are going to fall short of expectations. Colorado.
Yeah.
Because they're getting a ton of hype. I think I'm trying to think of who even is considered a really good team in the Big 12.
What about Arizona?
They got a lot of
hype towards the end of last year, and I think it's kind of continued on.
Borderline top 10 team. They're like Missouri.
Yeah,
they had a bit of a fluky year, and they'll be good, but not as good as they were last year. So Arizona is one for me that will fall short of expectations. TCU is a team that I think needs to be. People need to keep their eye on TCU this year. I'm not saying they're going to win the Big 12, but they're going to do some damage in the Big 12. They're going to knock a couple teams off that they're going to knock somebody out of the conference championship.
Right. They're going to be a part of the conversation when it comes to who's deciding who the Big 12 champ is. Yeah.
Yep. Somebody in the chat said Noah Fafita is a great college quarterback. Again, we'll see. I think he was good last year.
He's a great college quarterback.
Way too early to talk about him being a great college quarterback.
I'm not ready for that.
So this is a guy that passed for 2,869 yards last year, 25 touchdowns, 6 picks. That's a very good season. It's nothing great about it. He rushed for minus 33 yards and had no rushing touchdowns. I mean, literally his numbers were identical to Sam Hartman's, except Sam Hartman was a better runner. So no, I don't think he's a great quarterback. And I'm curious now, how is he going to do now that people have film on him?
Have film, yeah, exactly.
So how's that going to be? So we'll see. Now, they could be very good. He's got a great receiver to throw to. There's no doubt about that. But we'll see if he can do that. We'll see if he can do that. Somebody, speaking of the Big 12, somebody asked, and we'll talk about this when we do our Big 12 preview, Andrew, but do you think Cincinnati's coach will survive this year? Probably survive the year. I don't know how much longer he's going to be. Isn't this only his second year?
Yeah, this
Cincinnati.
Will be year 2. Yeah.
You don't often see coaches get fired that early, into year 2, but he's probably going to be a little bit on the hot seat this season. No doubt about it. Do we leave anybody out? We did Big 10, right? Did ACC, Big 12. Yeah, we
didn't do the Pac-2.
Pass. Pass. All right.
Okay. John A1, choosing between extremes. Prospect 1, elite size and length versus prospect 2, elite speed and athleticism. Which prospect do you choose?
Well, I would need a little bit more context to the size of prospect number 2.
And what position are we talking about?
Well, pick anyone. For me, any other than offensive line, I would say I need to know the size. So for example, whether you're talking about D-line or linebacker or receiver or running back, it's all the same. So to me, elite size and length is going to be very valued for me at almost every position over elite speed and athleticism if there's an extreme difference in size. So are we talking about like a 6'2" corner with like 34-inch arms who runs a 4.55 compared to a 5'8" corner who runs a 4.25? Give me the 6'2" guy that runs a 4.55. You know what I mean? If we're talking about a 5'11" corner that runs a 4.3 and a 6'2" corner that runs a 4.55, depending on my scheme, I would assuming technical aspects are equal. Let's assume that for the sake of conversation, Vince. Let's some context. Let's assume.
I need a little more.
Let's assume that from a technical standpoint, an experience standpoint, like some of those things are equal.
Okay.
Right. So we're just talking about, do you take Cam Hart or do you take the late Durant Williams? It's a kid that played at Oklahoma State for the Broncos. He was a great corner. He's 5'8". I'm taking Cam Hart. I mean, if that's my option. Same with D-line. It's like, okay, if I have a guy that's super fast and elite and he's 6'1", 240, I may still take that guy compared to the guy that's 5'10", 230. I just need a little bit more context. But with the big guys, linebacker, D-line, O-line, I would lean towards number 1. With skill players, I would probably lean towards number 2, Vince. But I would need a little bit more context on how different is the length gap between the two. That would be where I'd come from on that one.
Yeah, and my big skill would also be prospect 1. You know what I mean? Linebackers, tight ends, like that would be, yeah.
Now, in some offenses, I would lean towards 2 for tight end. In my offense, and in Notre Dame's offense, you are correct.
Yes.
In certain offenses where their tight end's kind of like a flex guy. I can handle an Evan Ingram type of guy.
Right.
In Notre Dame's offense, that wouldn't work as well.
Right. Agreed.
So that's part of the context too. But if you look at Notre Dame and we're talking Notre Dame, then yes, I think I would agree with that at tight end as well. Look at Michael Mayer.
Right. John A1, will Notre Dame average more yak in 24 than it did in 2015?
That's going to be tough, man, because that's the one thing that offense was great at, was yards after contact or catch, however you want to define it. I mean, oh boy, that's if we're talking yards after the catch, no. If we're talking yards after contact, yes. I'll say yes. Right? Because like yards after the catch, it's like, okay, Will Fuller beats a guy on a post route, catches it at midfield,
and then
runs the other 50
yards. Yeah.
Never gets touched. That's after the catch. But, yards after, because that was a small receiving core. And they weren't great at yards after contact. They were great at yards after the catch. So if we're going to go yards after contact, I would say yes, this offense will be better. Yards after the catch, yeah, a little bit different deal.
Muhammad Abdi, Brian, what are the challenges playing service academies triple option before big games in 24?
Looking at it.
So Navy, you have a bye week after Navy. Mm-hmm. So I don't see that as being a challenge at all because you've got plenty of time to reset.
So the question is before big games. So
Navy's before Florida State.
So you've got Navy. They play Navy on October 26th. Then they have a bye on November 2nd. Then they play Florida State. And then you do have it right before Army and USC. What are some challenges? Well, one challenge is, even with a bye week, it's still a challenge, but it's more so for to your point, Vince, the Army USC game.
Yeah.
Is you are comparing your defense is preparing. This is only for one side of the ball.
Correct.
Your defense is preparing for something that's everything about it's different. Other than you have to have 11 guys on the field,
which is key.
Everything else is about it is different when
Right.
you're preparing for a triple option team. How you line up,
Yes.
the calls you make, the coverages you use, the block destruction that you teach.
Maybe the position that you're playing.
Everything is different.
Remember, Jack Kaiser played safety against Navy last year and got the game ball because he had like 8 tackles. You know, I mean,
like somebody said in the chat, like it's limited now with the elimination cut blocks. No, it's not, because the cut blocks were you can still cut, you just can't cut the same way you did back then. But there's still things that they teach that you got to be really good at getting guys off your knees. Because they'll just kind of root hog through there, right? Just go low. They're not cutting you, but they're driving right through your thighs, right? So that's still a cut block. What they've really eliminated are those low cut blocks where it's like taking a guy's lower body out,
going down and rolling,
right?
Yeah,
but that's not even the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is the triple option aspect of it, right? It's the discipline
100%.
of you got to stay on your key, you got to do this, you got to do that. So it's still the same, honestly, in that regard. So that's where I'm going to disagree a little bit with Joe. Is the risk of injury is less now than it was then.
Correct.
The wear and tear on your lower body is different now than it was before the cut block rules. That's changed. The preparation, the challenge of preparation for your defense is exactly the same way it was in the past.
Yes.
Because you still have to take on block destruction in a completely different manner. The manner in which you line up is still vastly different. It's not like nothing you'll do all season. The knowing your cues, knowing your read, you're teaching things as far as discipline and assignments and lanes and coverage and what you're king in things that you will never teach any other time of the season.
Right.
It's just vastly different. So that is a challenge. It is absolutely a mental preparation challenge for defensive teams. And then you've got to deprogram everything you've known and learn something new. And then as soon as that game is over, you've got to deprogram that and sort of relearn everything else.
Tough.
That is not easy.
The only thing that I will say that is I don't even know if I would even use the word benefit, Brian, but Army comes second. So now Army and Navy run the option they run it a little bit differently.
It's going to look a lot different this year, I think.
Okay. So
because Navy's leaning into changing. Army seems to be going back.
They're going
because
back
they tried changing last year. Did not work. And they went back to the triple. Yeah.
So, but a lot of the concepts are still the same. And so you've kind of got that in the back of your head already because you already played Navy. So it's there, right?
Yeah.
But the turnaround is so much faster.
Right.
And like you said, there's nothing about the USC offense that is in any way similar to what Navy does.
No.
And then you throw in the fact that you're going all the way to the East Coast for one game and then all the way to the West Coast for the very next game.
Yeah. Which I don't like.
That adds to it too. And that's where that schedule creation comes into play. Yeah.
Now, in Notre Dame's defense, they were put in this situation because Miami
because of Miami.
Out.
100, yes, absolutely.
And it was hard. It was going to be hard to fit Navy in because if you fit Navy in one of the other bye weeks, and you've got a stretch of like 9 games in a row where you would play games.
Yeah.
So they were kind of in a tough spot with this one.
They were.
I mean, if we're being,
I think they did the best they could with what the hand that they were dealt.
Yeah,
I will say that.
Yeah. Now, the thing I will say to you, Vince, is Navy and Army are definitely different. Even if Navy goes back to what they did before, they're very different. Whereas Army, they're just different.
They are.
Schematically. But a lot of the principles to defending them are the same. You're going to line up differently to Army compared to Navy. If Navy goes back to their their version of the triple option, because there's really 3 different ones. Navy and Army are similar, but they're different. And then the flex bone at Air Force is completely different.
Yes.
And the old school, like the Fisher DeVere flex bone. And even now, what Troy Calhoun is running now is they line up in shotgun a lot.
Yes, they
and
do.
Run the option.
Yeah.
So it's a very different triple option, but the principles are similar. It's kind of like playing 2 West Coast teams. John Gruden's version of the West Coast looks a lot different than Mike Shanahan's version of the West Coast, but the principles to defending them are still kind of similar. You got to be prepared for certain things.
Right.
And so those are things you look at and say, the discipline of your keys, how you line up,
Yeah.
Those things there's going to be some similarities there where they're going to be better prepared for Army than they are for Navy. Even though the schemes are different, it's like playing two air raid teams.
Right.
Different scheme, but the principles.
Yes, and you've
You
experienced
saw
it.
one, you're going to be able to more easily adjust to the second
Right.
one. So I think that was a great point you made, Vince. Is yes, they're different in how they go about it, but the principles that you're going
Right.
to learn and implement are going to be better, which should help them.
Yes,
getting ready for that Army game.
Yep, and they'll do some triple option concept stuff during fall camp.
They do, yeah.
Because they always do that, and they always take a couple of days and they talk some triple before they get into A&M prep specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always good to kind of mix it up in fall camp too, as opposed to just doing the same thing over and over again those first couple of weeks. And so they'll throw a little bit of triple in there, and then they'll really get after it. The good thing is, from a defensive standpoint, and that's what we're talking about here, right? The good thing is Al Golden and Marcus Freeman have a pretty good plan against Navy. Now, they tweak it every year because they know that Navy sees what they did, and and Army for that matter. So they always tweak it every year, but they've had some pretty good success against triple option. And that part is good too. So you've got a lot of guys defensively that have seen it, they've done it. And so it's just kind of relearning and getting after it and things like that. It would be a lot more complicated, Muhammad, if Notre Dame didn't see the option every single year. That I will say, because if this was just a one-off where it's not something that they've done, and the last time these guys may have seen option was maybe high school, then I would be a lot more concerned about the turnaround and about the game itself and all of those different things. Like, they see Navy every single year, and then they throw in a second service academy every now and again. So they understand the concepts. They've done it. The coaches have done it. The players have done it. So I'm not as concerned about it, but there's still a mental turnaround that you've got to do.
But the and I said this for years, Vince, the whole Navy problem that people talked about for years was always overblown.
Yes.
It wasn't a Navy problem. It was a Notre Dame problem. They had trouble after Navy because Notre Dame wasn't a very well-coached football team.
Right.
I mean, Notre Dame hasn't had the same issue in recent seasons for the most part, right? I mean, they haven't had the post-Navy hangover that they've had in past years. I mean, you look at Marcus Freeman's first year, they struggled with Navy, struggled mightily with Navy. The next week they went out beat BC 44-0. This year they played Tennessee, they played Navy 42-3 in a different continent, and came back and beat Tennessee State 56-3, and then beat NC State by 3 touchdowns. So this whole Navy thing, they beat Navy in 2021, and then a week later beat Virginia by 25. 2020 or 2019, they played Navy and beat them 52-20. A week later, they beat BC 40-7. 2018, they played Navy, beat them 42-22. Remember, out in San Diego. The next week, went on the road and beat a ranked Northwestern team by 10. So the last time Notre Dame lost to a team after playing Navy was Stanford in 2017, and that team was just collapsed, period, because of the Miami game. That wasn't because of playing Navy.
Yeah,
that was because of the Miami. They were never the same team after the Miami game.
No.
And so the Notre Dame struggled with it post Navy because of them just not being a very good football team.
Correct.
And I mean, heck, even 2016, Notre Dame plays Navy, they lose. The next week they go play Army and beat them 44-6.
Yeah.
I mean, so but then of course they lost to Virginia Tech the next week. 2015. They beat Navy one week and go out and beat USC the next. You saw some issues at times in the past because Notre Dame wasn't very good. They beat Navy in 2014 and then lose the next 4 games. Was that because they played Navy? I don't think that it was. I think anything to do with it. They lost to Navy in 2013 or beat Navy in 2013. The next week went out and lost to Pitt. Okay, they beat Navy in 2012 and then the next week struggled with Purdue. Is that because of Navy or because they, again, played on a different continent and they hadn't really found their groove yet? Beat Navy in 2011, then struggled to beat Wake Forest the next week. Are those things because of the triple option, or is it more because you are a team that just was not coached very well?
Right.
I mean, in 2010, they lost to Navy, and then the next week went out and lost to Tulsa. Well, if Dane Kriska doesn't get hurt, they blow Tulsa out. You know, I mean, that's just the reality of it. And then but later in that year, you went and played Army in Yankee Stadium, and the next week went on the road and beat USC that same season. So the Navy problem was more of a media-driven narrative than it was reality.
Yeah,
because they didn't have the same problem when they played Paul Johnson's Georgia Tech team. It was you just weren't a very good football team, or you weren't a well-coached football team. And so I think that was always very overblown. But that doesn't mean it's not a challenge shifting focus. To your point, Vince, is if you're a good coaching staff and you have a plan, it's better. You're going to be fine.
Absolutely.
And the fact that they have played the triple option helps. I mean, Al Golden struggled a little bit with the triple option. In the second half, they could not find any answers for stopping the triple option. Could not find dominated Navy in the first half. Had no clue how to stop them in the second half. Mm-hmm. Why? Al Golden hadn't played the option in like a decade. Well, guess what? Year 2, Al Golden's defense looked pretty good playing the triple option. You know what I mean? So, because he now had that experience under his belt. Now year 3, because there were some plays early against Navy last year where their quarterback missed some open guys that could have made that game maybe 49-17 instead of 49-3 or 42-3. So I just I think you made a great point. It's the experience. It's experience of playing it.
Yep.
And I've said this, that's what's hurt Navy the most as a program. Joining the AAC hurt them as a program because now they're seeing the same teams over and over and over again every year. Used to be they'd only play Notre Dame, Air Force, and Navy every year. That's the only teams they played every year. Now you've got coaches in the league sharing ideas on what's worked against Navy because they all play them every, a chunk of the teams are going to play them all the time. And I think that's hurt Navy. It's why Navy should have stayed an independent. I understand why they left, but they should have stayed independent for football because then they can control their own schedule. And it's a lot tougher to stop the triple option when you don't see it very often, Vince, to your point. So when you see it every year, you're going to have a plan for it. So now all these AAC teams have a plan for defending the triple option.
Exactly.
And plan isn't just about scheme. It's about how to prepare. Like you said, you get some work in during fall camp. You schedule yourself out a certain way as best you can. So it's much better to be able to have a plan to come up with a good plan when you see it. And hey, we tried this one year. Remember that one year Notre Dame tried to defend the option, Vince, by lining like 2 yards off the ball, like a yard and a half off the ball? Well, they tried it. They knew that was stupid.
It did not work.
Do it again. Did not work.
Did not work.
So, but you learn that stuff. Hey, let's try this. Sounds good on the chalkboard. We went out and did it on the field, and we got destroyed.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. Let's go. Let's go here.
Andre Tonsel, which position group which position group is really the key for wide receiver recruiting? Wide receiver or quarterback?
It's quarterback.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, I say last year, look, did the receivers play great last year? No. But if the quarterbacks would have done a better job of throwing them the ball as often as they should have, the story would be a little different. Yes. And with this group being more talented than more experienced than last year's group, it's quarterback. I mean, what Braden Lindsey did in the bowl game is what Braden Lindsey did every single week during the regular season, and that's get open deep.
Yeah,
every week, but didn't get thrown a football. It's not his fault. So yes, 100% agree. I believe I love because you can see that Andre's thinking about it because he asked the question. Otherwise, why are you asking this question? Just you already know the answer.
Right, exactly.
Who's more important than Notre Dame's overall team success, the offensive line or the holder? You know what I mean? It's like, well, duh, right? This one is like, okay, I don't think it's an easy answer, but for me, it's an easy answer to say, but I think it's a complex thing to dive into.
Sure,
right? They have to play well, but here's the thing: if they play well, doesn't mean that their production is going to get any better.
Right.
If the quarterback doesn't play better. So, yeah, it's a good one, Andre.
Andrew Gilmore, why do you think Notre Dame has been so successful recruiting linebackers when they only play 2 linebackers the majority of the time?
Well, number one, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that premise. I understand where you're coming from, but I think when you use the word majority, I mean, I guess if you're using it by the strict definition of the word majority, sure, but they play 4 linebackers every game last year. A lot of times 5. And Maris is playing, JD was playing, and Jack was playing, but they also would play Jalen Snead a lot, at least early on. And this year going to play even more. So why are they so successful at it? Well, you have a head coach who was a 100+ tackle team captain at Ohio State, who was a 4th-round NFL draft pick as a linebacker.
Right.
Your linebackers coach was a 3-time All Big Ten player and an All-American at linebacker. And you have Al Golden, who's coached linebacker. So, I mean, that helps. I mean, it certainly helps.
Doesn't hurt.
Notre Dame has pretty good traditional linebacker. They've had 3 Butkus Award winners in the last 11, 12 seasons. Nobody else says that.
That's true.
And, they've been able to sell the fact that, hey, in a 16-game season, we're not playing 2 linebackers every down like we have in the past. We're going to need to play a lot of different guys.
Mm-hmm.
I also think, too, what helps now, Andrew, is now that football is going to more of a situational – college football's going the route of the NFL in a good way, in that they are doing more situational football. There is more of our nickel, right? Remember, Vince, when you and I were growing up, nickel, what was that? It was one dude runs off and one guy runs on.
Correct.
I mean,
seriously,
that was your nickel.
It was one linebacker goes off, a corner comes in.
That was your nickel package. Your dime package was either 2 linebackers run off or a linebacker and a D lineman run off.
Correct.
And 2 DBs run on. Now, you go nickel, you might trade half your lineup.
Yes.
And some of the guys that are still in are moving somewhere else, you know? And so that also plays into it to where, like, look, ideally it's like Dylan McCullough's, we got 8 starting positions thing. Well, that's kind of true at linebacker too. Like, hey, you may not be the starting Mike, but, let's say Drake Bowen's okay in pass pro, Vince, but, let's say Bodie Cahoon someday is elite in pass pro. Well, you may see times where Bodie comes in as part of your nickel package. I'm just using that as a hypothetical, and kind of going from there. So I think that helps too. When you look at this conversation, Vince, that I think that helps with the way to sell it as well.
Yeah, for sure. We talk about the lack of wide receiver recruiting because of, Notre Dame not putting wide receivers in the draft and all of those things. 3 buckets of winners in the last decade plus. Like,
right. It's like 2012 to 2023 is what, 12 seasons, right? 12 seasons.
Like, that's actually was
yeah. And they won it from 20 to 20 or 12 to 20. They won 3.
Right.
So
I mean,
yeah. And those guys are guys that, kids still know a little bit who Jalen Smith is. They definitely know who Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is. We'll find out. We'll find out if they can build on that. But those are all factors into why that is the case. They're also good at evaluating too, finding guys that fit into the Notre Dame culture and selling that part of it.
PA Irish guy using 1 scholarship running back for each attribute of speed, power, vision, feet, and hands. Build your perfect running back. 10 of all of those. That's my perfect running back.
Using 1 scholarship running back for each attribute. So power, I'm going to go Keidron Young. Feet, vision, I'm going to go Jadarian Price. Now, can I use the same guy for multiples? I'm going to say yes, I can.
You're going to run out of running backs if you don't.
Speed, I'd probably go Jeremiah Love, but I wouldn't do that as definitively as maybe some people think. But I'll probably go Jeremiah. So Jeremiah speed, Keidron Young power, Jadarian Price vision. I don't know that I can decide between Jeremiah and Jadarian when it comes to feet. I really don't know that I can. Aeneas Williams has pretty good feet as well. I'm going to go pick one, Jadarian or Jeremiah. I don't really care which one you pick. Hands, probably Jeremiah, but Aeneas Williams has pretty darn good hands as well. So in an attempt to get everyone involved, I'll go hands for Aeneas Williams. That way everyone was assigned. All the not counting Devin Ford, who's, a little bit different situation, but using the other 4 guys, that's what I'll go with.
Look at you giving everybody a medal.
Yeah, but it's also kind of true.
I know.
I mean,
I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah, I mean, Aeneas Williams had over 2,000 career receiving yards in high school. He can catch. He's got pretty good hands.
Yeah,
he's got pretty good hands.
That's great.
Yeah, yep. So I got to go with that one. It's a good question.
Matthew Wyrick, what freshman on offense and defense could you see having an immediate or early season playing time?
Ooh, on offense, one of the two freshmen, speaking of running backs, one of those two freshmen is going to probably have to play at running back a little bit.
Yeah, because they're going to be number 3.
Yeah. Offensive line, we talked about possibly Kirby Lambert. I think the 3 freshman receivers will all get a chance. I don't know if they'll all play, but they'll all get a chance. So Micah Gilbert. Right now, if I were to rank who I think has the best chance to play early, it'd be Gilbert, Cam, Saldate in that order.
Agreed.
And I would say Saldate is probably closer to Cam than Cam is to Micah, just from where they are in their development standpoint. Mike is obviously immensely talented. Defensively, Kingston's going to play. Is he going to start? I don't think so, but he's going to play. He's too good not to play. You got to find a role for that kid. Bryce Young's going to play.
Yep,
I think Sean Sevillano is going to play this year. I think they're going to find a way to get his. I mean, you just don't have anybody else that has that beef. You just don't. I think he's going to have a role, goal line, short yardage, something like that, Sean. Vince, I think as long as Sean has a good offseason and puts in the work, I think Sevillano is going to play this year. And then another freshman that I would keep my eye on, Vince, this year is when you look at impact players, because I did say Bryce Young, right? Leonard Moore, because of the injury to Benjamin Morrison's probably going to get a lot more reps and could potentially get more reps in fall camp.
Okay.
And some of the things I've heard about him so far are impressive.
Okay.
So he could have a shot to work into the rotation too because of the injuries. So that'd be my freshman group. So, yeah. And then Joseph Vance might have a shot to battle for the long snapper job. I don't know that he'll win it, but he'll have a shot to battle for it. And look, I know he's not a scholarship guy, but he was recruited like a scholarship guy because he's one of the best in the country at what he was recruited to do.
Correct.
So it's not as praiseworthy because, like you're not going to hear a lot about Joseph Vance in his career because he's going to be good at what he does. And you know what I mean? If you hear about him, it's probably bad. It's probably not good.
It's
you
true.
know, and the only reason people ever talked about Michael Vincent is because of his nickname.
Milk.
That's it. They didn't talk about it. Why? Because he was really good at his job.
Yep.
And you never had a reason to talk about it.
And there's a reason they kept inviting him back until he was literally exhausted from his eligibility.
It wouldn't shock me if I found out they tried to find a way to get can we get a 7th year in here somehow?
I mean,
like Tyler Shuck's getting 8 years as a quarterback. I mean, Cameron Rising's getting 8 years as a quarterback. Can we get another year for Michael Vincent, please?
They would have taken him in a heartbeat. Yes. I can promise you that.
But that's what Joseph Vance was recruited to do also.
Right.
Is to hopefully be that kind of player as a long snapper. So, again, I think right now Reno probably has the lead there. Andrew Cross is going to, battle for that as well. But Joseph Vance can't be, he'll have a chance to compete for that as well, Vince. I believe. You've seen him snap, right? I mean, looks pretty good, right?
There's a reason he's number 1 in his class or where.
Yeah, because he was ranked, was one of the I thought one of the kicking services did rank him number 1 as the number 1 long snapper, I believe. All right, so while you're looking that up, Vince, I'll go ahead and read this next one from Mr. 2.0. Cool. If USC backs out, Notre Dame should schedule UCLA the first 2 years after to just be petty. Thoughts? I think that's a brilliant idea. I think that's absolutely a brilliant idea. Yes, if USC backs out and USC is willing to play Notre Dame, I would absolutely. Matter of fact, I would probably schedule USC for 4. That's what I would. I mean, I would really say, sign. Screw you. We'll be fine. You know what I mean? We'll play your biggest rival. And I would do all these things to sell the matchup. I'd do some big presentation about it, and take some little jabs at USC
as
being
much
punks
as
on the way out.
Possible.
Yep.
As much as humanly
Absolutely
possible.
Cowards.
Yeah.
Did you find the answer to that, by the way?
He apparently didn't go through Coles because he's not ranked at all, which obviously it's not.
I think he went through the other. What's the name of the other one?
Well, there's Sailors on the West Coast.
That's what I think.
Where's he from? Is he a West Coast?
I think he's a California kid, but I could be completely wrong.
And he probably went through Sailors.
I could be completely wrong on that. No, he's Vance or it's what's his name?
You said Vance.
Yeah, well, I think I might be getting his name wrong. Give me a second.
Okay.
But yeah, I thought it was Joseph Vance is what I thought his name was, but I could be typing that in wrong. I believe I'm typing that in wrong because his name's not popping up.
Okay.
So let me see here. Long snappers. Let's see. There's Reno, Andrew Cross, and Joseph Vinci. It's Joseph Vinci.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay.
Let's see here. Joseph Vinci. All right, he is from – where is he from? He is from Massachusetts. So I don't know if you pipe in the – usually helps them when you're doing a search, Vince,
Yeah,
to be given the correct name. So my apologies to Joseph. It's Joseph Vinci is his name. So I said Vance. So it's Joseph Vinci.
Vinci?
Vinci, yeah.
Okay.
So apologies for that. I couldn't remember where he was from, but I knew he was very highly ranked guy. So yes, there was that. All right, so let's go to okay, here's one from Henry Reese. Do you think Miami can win the ACC and sneak into the playoffs this year?
It's going to be
tough.
I
think they can? Yes, I think they can.
Of course they can, but
look,
they got a big hill to climb.
Because I don't think they even need to be number 1. I think they just need to be number 2. And I think they have a shot to do that. There's no question. One thing that helps Miami a little bit this year too, Vince, is they do have obviously some non-conference games that can help them build up their perception. I mean, it's like it's not going to be huge. It's Florida.
Right.
But if they just go beat the bricks off of Florida and then Florida has some competitive games in the league, then sure, that can help them. But Miami, they get Louisville on the road, but then they get Florida State at home. They get Virginia Tech at home. They don't play Clemson. They don't play NC State. They don't play, like I said, they get Virginia Tech at home. So I think their schedule is somewhat favorable. And then if they go on the road and start the season off with a win at Miami, like I could see 11-1 or 10-2 in that regard. So certainly
definitely possible.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible, but it would be
I'm not sure if I'm predicting it or not yet,
exactly.
but I don't think it would, because again, it comes down to, are they coached well or not? And is Cam Ward a leader or not? Those are the two things for me. Is Cam Ward a legitimate leader, or is he just a mercenary that's there to get the paycheck and put up numbers?
I think it's
because there's a difference between that and a guy that's a winner.
Right.
And we'll find, I mean, we got to find out if Riley Leonard's that guy or not, but I think there's more evidence that it's a concern for Cam Ward than there's evidence that it's a concern for a guy like Riley Leonard. So, we'll see. But I'm not a big fan of Mario Cristobal as a coach. He's a good recruiter, but can he coach well enough to, because like I said, their schedule's not super hard, Vince, but Florida can beat them at Florida.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech can beat them, even in Miami. Louisville can beat them. Florida State can beat them. Georgia Tech can beat them. Georgia Tech beat Miami last year at Miami. So, of course, they can beat them again this year. And then I think Syracuse could have a shot to beat them at Syracuse. I'm not saying they all will. I'm just saying they can. So they're going to have to kind of grow up, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, will they do that or not? That's a good question. Good question. All right, here we go.
We got a super chat from D Irish Fan Podcast. Thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate you. Your earlier conversation about USC and Riley, is that an attempt from the Big Ten or college football at large to force Notre Dame to join a conference, mainly the Big Ten?
I don't think so. I don't think it's that deep.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Agreed.
I mean, because the other thing, too, is this isn't the only school that USC's done this with. They tried to get out of the USC or the LSU game, and they canceled the Ole Miss series that was supposed to start next season. There was a home and home against Ole Miss. They canceled that as well. I think this is just some teams are living in this world of, hey, we need to schedule our way into the playoff.
Right. Exactly.
I don't believe in that. You schedule yourselves to build towards being successful in the playoff. If you backdoor your way into the playoffs because you scheduled an easy road, I don't think that necessarily gets you a championship. I don't think that's the case. Michigan, sure, it happened with Michigan. But again, Michigan still had to go on the road and beat Penn State and still had to beat Ohio State and still had to, beat Iowa and still had to beat Bama. I mean, they still had to earn those wins. If you're not good enough to win, you're going to get exposed at some point in time, whether it's the regular season or whether it's getting into the postseason and getting exposed in the first round. And I don't think that's going to work. So I don't think it's that. Do I think that behind the scenes, the Big Ten and NBC may try to do some things with them? Be curious. I'll tell you something, Vince, I'm very curious about.
Okay. With
Pete Vivacqua's relationship with NBC.
Yep.
This is the first time I've ever felt there's a chance, now that the Big Ten's with the ACC, this is the first time I've ever felt that there's a chance that if the ACC goes away, that the Big Ten would be willing to form a partnership with Notre Dame in the way that the ACC and the Big East have in the past, which is we'll take all your other sports. Football can stay independent, but you got to play minimum 4 games against teams in our league every year. I could see that being. I think there's a better leadership structure in place to where I think they'd be more willing to do that. I'd be okay with that for the most part. I don't really care where the other sports play. I don't care if it's the Big East. I don't care if it's the AAC. I don't care if it's the ACC. I care about that the football team stays independent. That's what I care about.
Yeah.
And in the past, the Big Ten was you're either all in or you're all out.
Right.
And honestly, that's okay. I think that's a fair take by the Big Ten. They don't necessarily need Notre Dame to that degree but I think now because of the TV deals are under the same umbrella, it just makes more sense to say, hey, let's partner with Notre Dame in some way. And I think Fox might even kind of push that needle a little bit as well, because Fox says, hey, look, we want to get some Notre Dame games on. They're not going to join the league, so at least we can get something out of it. Like, do we want to make some money off Notre Dame or no money off Notre Dame? It's basically the way you look at it. Well, I want to make some money off Notre Dame. And bringing the other sports on is a way to do that. And then having the deal with the ACC, which is, because then you can say, well, okay, we'll play 5 games here against the Big Ten. Okay. But 2 of those are going to be Michigan State and USC every year. So now it's only 3 teams outside of those that you've got to cycle through, for however long. Okay, cool. Fine. Whatever. I'd be more open to that. I'm completely 100% against joining the Big Ten for football. I don't really care about the other sports. And like I said, somebody said they're already in the Big Ten for hockey. They've actually kind of did with the women's basketball team and men's basketball teams when they went to the ACC. You guys sure you want us in our league, in your league? Because women's basketball dominated the ACC, and the men's basketball had a lot of success in there early too. So that's kind of where I'm at. So, but I don't think that's the plan. I don't think that's a ploy. Right. I think that's link. It would be a ploy if you were hearing it from more people.
Yeah.
Like I think the ACC a couple years ago tried to coerce Notre Dame to join it because you had like 7 or 8 different coaches talk about it. Like, why are they talking about Notre Dame at their media days? This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I think there was a strategy to say, let's, shortly after they had played in the ACC, hey, let's see if we can kind of maybe try to convince Notre Dame. I think they went about it the wrong way. And some of those coaches were speaking nonsense. But at least there was a strategy involved. I don't think that's what this is.
Right. Exactly.
I think this is just Lincoln Riley being Lincoln Riley.
Yeah.
It's a fair question, Vince, and I really appreciate the super chat. It's a very fair question. And I wouldn't even say that that's necessarily a bad thing if they tried to do that. I just don't think that's what was behind it.
This is just a coach shooting his mouth off.
That's what I think so. Yeah. I think so. But if
now, could it lead to something else though? Like maybe all of a sudden they're like, oh, you know what? Let's go maybe jump on that bandwagon. Like, okay, maybe, but I don't. First of all, if I was going to try to do something, not sneaky, but like, try to use the underground.
Strategic.
There you go. I'm not going to Lincoln Riley. I'll just say that. He's not the guy that I'm having.
I would go to USC, and unfortunately, he's the face of USC.
True, but I would go to a more established Big Ten school.
Yeah, but I think if it was a strategy, I think the first salvo is, however, the rival of Notre Dame that just joined our league.
Okay,
I think that's the first salvo. And then you follow up with Ohio State saying, we'd love to have this be more of a regular thing. And have Michigan State say, I missed that rivalry with Notre Dame. I wish we could have that back. It'd be cool if there was some way that, right? I mean.
Yeah, no, I get that.
But I think you'd have to start. I don't know that, like to your point, maybe then you go through the USC AD and not Lincoln Riley. Yeah. So I think that's fair. But I do think USC would be the first way to go. I just think maybe the commissioner would say it or the AD at USC would say it. I just think in this case, Lincoln Riley's just running off at the mouth. And he thinks he's slick. That's what I think is,
He does. Definitely does that.
Yeah, he does. Yep, he definitely does. All right.
Ben Tarnowski.
This was in response to the question we had earlier where I said I think it does more for Michigan than for Notre Dame.
Oh, why do you think it does more for Michigan than us?
Look, part of Michigan's fan base is just stupidity, if I'm being honest. Not all. We've had some good Michigan fans in our chat. I haven't seen Antoine in a while, but Antoine Johnson's a very good Michigan fan. But a lot of the overall stupidity of Michigan fans is an inferiority complex. That's why they took such joy of calling Michigan State little brother, because they were Ohio State's biatch for a long time, and they've never there's so much jealousy amongst that fan base for, we taught you how to play football, yeah, and we did it better than you.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah, you taught us how to do it, and then we showed you how to make it great. You know what I mean? There's such jealousy there. There's an inferiority there with Michigan. And even when Michigan was great, it's kind of like you expected Notre Dame. Notre Dame should beat Michigan. They're a national program. Michigan's a regional program. And so when Notre Dame would beat Michigan, there was never this, oh, wow, they beat Michigan. Heck, in 2018, Notre Dame beat Michigan, and I had to listen to Kirk Herbstreit's you-know-what at the end of the year talk about, well, I know Notre Dame beat them, but that was all the way back in September. And right now, Michigan's really, really good. I'm going to stop talking now that Ohio State just beat the brakes off of them. You know what I mean? But Notre Dame got no love for that. If Michigan would have beat Ohio State, that's all they or beat Notre Dame. That's all they would talk about. Oh yeah, but they beat Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame. It's such a big win. They beat Notre Dame. So I think that the way that is, and this has been true my whole life. Whenever Michigan would beat Notre Dame, it was always like this Heisman moment and this huge win and this huge thing. And when Notre Dame did it, you're like, oh man, they barely beat Michigan. Michigan played them tough. Michigan always plays Notre Dame tough. Well, why isn't it Notre Dame plays Michigan tough? Why? Because Notre Dame's considered the superior program, right? As far as just overall program, yes, I know Michigan won it last year. They finally won a full championship since the end of World War II. Congrats. You know what I mean? But they've always been an inferior program in status. And so when you play a team like that, and they are good, and I'm not going to say Michigan's not a really good program. They have been, but you're always considered, it's, hey, when we beat them, it's like, okay, whatever. You're supposed to beat them. You have better athletes, whatever. When they beat you, it's like hype machine for Michigan. Yeah. Oh, they beat Notre Dame, beat Notre Dame, beat Notre Dame. So, yeah, that's why I say they get more out of it than Notre Dame does. Michigan needs a game like that to gain national notoriety. Notre Dame doesn't need Michigan to gain national notoriety. They have USC. They have all the other games that they play. So that's why I think that's a good question, Ben.
Tom Jepsinski, with the recent wide receiver recruiting failures, is there any concern on holding on to Deuce? He needs targets to throw. Well, luckily they allow more than one class to play football at the same time.
That. B, they have a top 100 tight end in the class. And C, Auburn has 0 top receivers committed. 0. Notre Dame has 2 receivers committed. Ole Miss has 1. So note the 2 schools that everybody says that Deuce is looking at, which I don't believe, Ole Miss and Auburn, you combine them together, they have fewer pass catchers in their classes to combine together than what Notre Dame has. So again, whenever people kind of freak out about, is Deuce going to look around? Is he going to look around? Well, okay, well, you need to then tell me who he's going to look around to. He's not going to Ohio State. They already have a quarterback. He's not going to Bama. They already have a quarterback. They're going to Georgia. They already have a quarterback. Okay. They're not going to Texas. They already have a quarterback. So who's going to flip him? Ole Miss? Who's Ole Miss? Who's he going to throw to at Ole Miss? They have 1 receiver committed in their class. That's it. Who's he going to throw to at Auburn? They have 0 receivers committed in their classes. So you need to at least have some context of, okay, well, who should I be concerned about? Because the schools that everybody links to them, they have fewer receivers than Notre Dame does. And they don't have tight ends, especially the kind that Notre Dame has. And they don't have offensive line classes. So I just think this is another thing that I think Notre Dame fans are panicking about when there's no reason to panic yet. If he starts taking visits, then you should never panic about recruiting. But if you're going to panic, if he takes visits, then panic. But this right here, this is something where you're panicking. This is more of a Notre Dame fan emotional reaction more so than it is how a recruiter is going to respond. Because the schools he would look at, if he was going to think about it, are worse off there than Notre Dame is. So why should we be concerned?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not there. Just not there.
Andrew Gilmore, who was the best running back in college football in the last 30 years? I would say Ricky Williams.
I mean, he certainly rushed for the most yards. I don't know that I would. I mean, I don't know that I would say it's Ricky Williams. I think Ricky Williams is a great running back. I don't think that he would be my pick I mean, Ron Dane rushed for more yards than he did. Oh, look, I think Jonathan Taylor was a better running back than Ricky Williams just in the last 30 years. He played recently. I'd take Reggie Bush over Ricky Williams. I'd take LaDainian Tomlinson over Ricky Williams over the last 30 years, because the last 30 years is going to take us back to 1994. Yeah, 1994 would be the last 30 years, right?
Derrick Henry's got to be up there.
Well, yeah. Thing for me about Derrick Henry is when I look at like best running back, to me it's sort of a lifetime thing. It's like when people ask me, is Barry Sanders the best running back in college football history? I say no. He had the greatest season that a running back has ever had in college. Derrick Henry had 1 year of over 1,000 yards in his career. One. And that was his senior year, his last year, his junior year. He went for over 2,000. So he was great that year, but his freshman year he ran for 382, and next year he ran for 990. So he had 3,500 careers. So if you're going to say take individual seasons, Vince, or just talent, then yes, you're correct. When I look at it, I kind of usually try to look. You can look at however you want, Vince. I'm just explaining, like, for me.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm just throwing out. Throwing out a name.
I would take more like career. So it's like LaDainian Tomlinson was phenomenal his whole career. Jonathan Taylor, I think, literally rushed for over 2,000 yards, I think, every season. Because the thing about Ricky Williams, I'm going to actually pull this up to make my point. So Ricky Williams in his career, he was great his last couple years. So let me just pull this up here real quick to make my point here, Vince. So Ricky Williams is the third all-time leading rusher in college football history. He ran for 6,279 yards. He ran for 990 as a freshman, 1,272 as a sophomore, very good. 1,893 as a junior, and then 2,124 as a senior, and he had over 25 or more touchdowns both of those 2 years. So he ended up with 6,279 yards, and he had 72 rushing touchdowns. And the other thing about Ricky Williams, which often gets overlooked, is Ricky had 927 career receiving yards. Then you look at Jonathan Taylor, and Jonathan Taylor in his career finished with 6,174 career yards. So it's 105 fewer than Ricky. Jonathan Taylor played 3 years. He had 1,977 yards as a freshman, 2,194 yards as a sophomore, and 2,003 yards as a junior. And then he went pro. Like, okay, was Ricky better than Jonathan Taylor because he had more yards? He had 105 more yards in a whole extra season. You know what I mean? So, like, Ricky played in, 46 games in his career. Jonathan Taylor played in 41. Am I doing that? So 46 compared to 37, 41. So I guess that's 5 fewer games. He had more yards in 5 fewer games. Ricky Williams averaged 6.2 yards per rush in his career. Jonathan Taylor averaged 6.7. And I would argue that Ricky played on better teams and had better talent around him than what Jonathan Taylor would have. So, like, that's kind of the way I look at it, Vince, is like some of these guys that don't necessarily rank up there in all-time numbers compared to Ricky Williams, it's because they left early. You know, like if J.K. Dobbins would have come back for his senior year, he'd have been around 6,500 yards because he was at 4,459 in 3 years. He ran for 1,403 as a freshman, 1,053 as a sophomore, and then 2,003 as a junior. Well, you know what? I should take that back. In a normal situation, he wouldn't have done that because his senior year would have been the COVID year, so he only played 8 games. But like if it was a normal situation, he would have been way over. So those are guys, if I'm building a team, I'd probably have over Ricky Williams. So, and again, if your argument for Ricky is yardage, then your pick should be Ron Dane.
Yeah.
Because Ron Dane rushed for more yards than Ricky Williams. And so I get you're not going to use Donnell Pumphrey, who's actually the all-time leading rusher because he was at San Diego State. That's fair. And I think he had a COVID year, I believe. But yeah, I mean, Ron Dane had more yards than Ricky, and Ron never rushed for 2,000 yards.
He was a bruiser.
He was really good.
He
was really good. He was really good. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, Vince. Is I got no problem if you want to take if you want to take Ricky Williams, I have no problem with it. Ricky's last 2 years were tremendous. He was a great back his last 2 years. There's just guys to me, I just think are better. So who did I say, Vince? I said LaDainian Tomlinson. I said Reggie Bush. I said Jonathan Taylor. I don't know for sure that I would take J.K. Dobbins. I think he was also a product of the system from the standpoint of his numbers were partly really good because he played on such a great team. But those are guys the last 30 years I'd probably consider taking. And there's some Adrian Peterson is one that I think you have to have a conversation about, although he never. So I'm pulling up his college stats real quick, Vince. Let me pull these up real quick. So his freshman year was phenomenal. He rushed for 1,925 yards. The problem is if you're going to take Ricky or Adrian, you kind of got to go based off his talent, because his next 2 years he ran for 1,100 yards, and then the next year only ran for 1,012. So Ricky never built on that great freshman year. So he was super talented, but did he have the career that other guys have? I don't know that he did. And so that's kind of where I would, maybe say I'd maybe want to have a little bit of talent wise, he's in there. He'd be kind of like a Derrick Henry type of argument.
Okay.
For me, to your point is he was great that 1 year, but he wasn't great his other 2 years. He was good, but he couldn't stay on the field. I mean, that's part of it, right? Is being healthy and not being suspended, or all parts of being a great player, right? So those are guys I look at that would be ahead of him. Like Reggie Bush. Think about Reggie Bush's college stats. I mean, these are kind of fun to look at, Vince. Reggie Bush is okay, do you consider him a great running back, or was he just a great player? Because remember the argument I had about Derrick Henry. Well, Reggie Bush only had one great year at USC also. He only rushed for 1,000 yards once in his career. That was his junior year. But Reggie was a guy that, he only ran for 908 yards in 2004. He had 509 receiving yards, 537 punt return yards that season, and 376 punt return yards, and then 537 kick return yards. Well, but that's all around player. That's not running back. That's fair. So but the other thing too that I look at Reggie is part of the thing that hurt Reggie statistically is he was splitting carries with Lindell White. So Lindell White ran for over 1,000 yards the year that Reggie ran for over 900. So that would be a fair argument to make as why he went there too. So somebody said you can't go with Jonathan Taylor because he wasn't good in big games. That's not because of Jonathan Taylor. That's because he didn't play on very good teams. I mean that's. So I'm going to push back on that one a little bit, and I don't even know that that's accurate. I'm actually going to pull that up here real quick, Vince, because I want to look at that one. I'm going to push back on that a little bit. So in Jonathan Taylor's junior year, they played a ranked Michigan team and beat them 35-14. He ran for 203 yards on 23 carries. They played at Ohio State. He didn't do well that game. 20 carries for 52 yards. They had a rematch against Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. He ran for 148 yards on 20 carries. He ran for 31 carries on 250 yards on 31 carries against a ranked Iowa team that year who had a great defense. And then 2018, let's see here. He ran for over 100 yards again against Iowa. He ran for over 100 yards against Michigan. He ran for 185 yards at Penn State in a loss to Penn State, but he ran for 185 yards at ranked Penn State. And then in the bowl game against Miami, he ran for 205 yards. So I'm going to – and then as a freshman, they also played at number 13 Miami – or not at – but against number 13 Miami in a bowl game, and he ran for 130 yards again that game. So I'm going to push back hard on the idea that Jonathan Taylor didn't play well in big games, because I just gave you a lot of big games where he played pretty darn well, statistically. And I remember some of those games. He was their offense. So the first half, Wisconsin, I think, had a lead over Ohio State at halftime in that Big Ten title game last year. And it was because of Jonathan Taylor. But he just was, him and Jack Cohn. Jack Cohn made a couple big throws in that game. But, Ohio State is a way better team. Way better team. So, hold on a second. Here's a guy somebody just mentioned in the chat, Vince. And I want to look at his stats real quick to see what they are. But he kind of, the last 2 years of Eddie George were within the last 30 years, but Eddie George didn't do anything his first 2 years. So again, he's another guy. So Rashawn Salam, the late Rashawn Salam.
Oh yeah, for Colorado.
I mean, he was a great running back for that 1 year, but he didn't have a great career. So he ran for 2,000 yards and won the Heisman, but his highest total before that was 844, and the highest total before that was 158. So, like, there's got to be something to the argument that, hey, look, you've got to do it for a career in college. You know what I mean? So that's a good discussion, Vince. Very good, very good one. I enjoyed that. And I believe, Mr. Vince, that was the last question.
Okay. That's a good way to end it, though.
Yeah, it was fun.
Little trip down memory lane.
Yeah, and some of those other guys that people like Marshall Faulk's not in the conversation. He was pre-1994. Garrison Hurst is, there's some Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson, George Rogers, Mike Rogers, Ernie Sim, Earl Campbell. Those guys are way before. The question was last 30 years.
Yes.
And I'm sure I'm missing somebody.
But it was fun bringing up a lot of those names because it brought back a lot of memories of watching highlights of those guys do the thing. Remember, back in the day, we couldn't watch all those games. It was Sports Center highlights that we were watching. At least it was for me.
Yeah. Well, back in the 90s, especially in some of the 90s as well, for sure.
Yeah. So I
absolutely
only saw the good. So
there's been some good backs, man. But I tend to go with guys that did it like all the time.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Like for years. Yeah, I mean, did any back that we talked about have a better 3-game stretch than what Ezekiel Elliott had at the end of the 2014 season?
Yeah,
probably not. Did guys have better careers? Yeah, for sure. But so it just depends on how you want to define it. I would simply say, some of the comments I've seen about Jonathan Taylor, I don't know where that comes from, and I think that's very I don't think that's accurate based on how it played out. But anyway, it's a fun conversation to have. I just wish Notre Dame had a guy in that conversation. That'd be fun.
That's fair too. Unfortunately, though, for Notre Dame, at least, because there's been some backs that have had one good year, that kind of thing, but Notre Dame hasn't really had an opportunity to have a back go freshman through senior year,
right?
Dominant for 4 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's more like
Reggie Brooks was great in 1992, but he also had to split carries with Jerome Bettis that year.
That's what I'm saying.
And that was his first year as kind of the guy, because before that, it was Ricky Waters, it was Tony Brooks. I mean, it was just there was other guys that were just kind of part of that. To your point, I mean, Ricky Waters was a really good back, but he was splitting carries with Jerome Bettis and Rodney Culver, and they always had that depth of running backs. And then, of course, a lot of those guys were playing with quarterbacks that could run.
Right.
It's kind of impacted that as well, especially those teams that were play with Tony Rice. But like in 1991, for example, Reggie Brooks only had 122 yards. The year before, he had that great breakout season. Why? Because they had Jerome Bettis, who ran for over 900 yards. His brother, Tony Brooks, ran for over 800 yards. Rodney Culver ran for 500. Those are all NFL running backs. Tony would have been an NFL running back if he didn't get in trouble. Like Reggie Brooks had that great 1 year, Vince, averaged 8 yards a carry. Do you know how many rushing yards he had for his career coming into that season? 165 career yards.
Yeah.
So, Jerome Bettis was a great running back for 2 years, but he was kind of a fullback. So, he never rushed for 1,000 yards. He had a lot of touchdowns, but never rushed for 1,000 yards. And so you just look at those things and you're like, man, Josh Adams had probably the closest thing Notre Dame's had to a guy that played as a freshman and then kind of was that guy for a while. Like Audric didn't play as a freshman, rotation guy in year 2, breakout year 3, NFL.
Right.
So you're right. That's a great point, Vince. They haven't had that back that was just so good that he came in right away and played right away. Notre Dame, like every year, Notre Dame was just replacing one back with another. I mean, Reggie Brooks leaves. You're like, man, how are you going to replace Reggie Brooks? We got this guy named Lee Becton. Oh, man, how are you going to replace Jerome Bettis? Well, we got this guy named Ray Zellers who's going to also be a first-round draft pick.
Handing the baton off. You know what I mean? It's like –
right.
That's just the reality of it.
Yeah. So, yeah, those it's it can be tough that way, but
right.
Yes. It'd be nice if Notre Dame gets there someday. Be kind of fun.
But you know what? I'm okay with them continuing to bring in stud backs. They have to sit for a minute, and then because there's a stud ahead of them, and then they get to put 1 to 2 years of amazing tape on, and then they head to the NFL. I'm okay with that too. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
All right. Like I said, cool conversation to kind of end it with. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us for as long as you did.
We might have a show tomorrow. Vince and I got to plan that, but we may have a show tomorrow. We'll let you guys know. But that's why, Vince, you got
to hit the notification bell, because you just never know. You just never know. You hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell. You share with your family and friends. You do all of these things so that you know if we have a show on a Saturday or a Sunday or a night show or, whatever, you know when to tune in. I mean, but you don't know unless you know. The other way to know is to be on the boards.irishbreakdown.com, because we usually let you know, hey, there's not going to be a show today, or we're going to have an extra show, and, all those kinds of different things. So if you just want one-stop shopping, boards.irishbreakdown.com, you're going to get everything that you need right there. So log in. Best bang for their buck out there when it comes to intel for any school, let alone Notre Dame. So that's where you need to be. So with that said, for Bryan, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Pod.